Good evening. This is the Town of Millis MBTA 3A Advisory Committee. The date is Monday, March 4th. I am Jody Garson, the chair, and I'll have our members introduce themselves, starting at my left.
Jeffrey Germagian.
Owen Salerno.
Craig Schultz.
Madeline Eustner.
Nicole Riley.
Rick Barrett.
And we have Bob Weiss here with us as well. And on Zoom, we have, I think, Alexis from MAPC.
Right, Alexis Smith from
Yep.
MAPC, and we also have Elizabeth Leiden, who is Town Council.
Great. All right. Well, we, on our agenda tonight is to discuss the draft zoning bylaw, which will be presented to the planning board on March 12th at 8:20 p.m. It will not be a Zoom meeting, so folks who want to be present or know kind of what's going on in the meeting, other than waiting for the minutes to come out, you got to come to the meeting. So why don't we, I'll turn it over to you, Bob, to kind of direct us through the zoning, the bylaw as we have it currently.
Okay. You didn't mention the Finance Committee on...
Yeah, well,
20th,
since I'm on the Finance Committee, I will make a point to make sure that we know when this will be presented.
Great. And folks who can come to the planning board, you can always give me an email, and that would be great to have some supporters there, but also to have somebody who can explain certain things.
Yeah.
Excuse me, on that point, Madam Chair, will
Yes.
you be at planning board?
Yes, I plan to be
Okay,
there,
so,
barring any major illness.
Bob, you will need to post it as a public hearing since I'm a member of the planning board. We probably want to post that
Yes.
3A is having a joint public, because if one other person from this committee
Yep.
shows up, it has to be, so just to be safe, since
Yeah.
at least two of us we know will be there.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yes, thank you.
We'll do that. Okay. Well, let me ask you, because I haven't spoken with Alexis, I don't know if you want to bring us through this, because you've been kind of have the 40,000-foot view of this, or if you want me to take us through the bylaw.
Bob.
I'll use the mic. Alexis, did you want me to bring people through the bylaw, or did you want to present the bylaw?
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that the direction your head was looking. I couldn't tell you were talking to me. Yes, if you could, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
I am pinch hitting for some folks who have been more deeply involved in the process.
Okay.
So happy to answer questions.
And I have no idea which way I'm looking, because we're on Zoom and TV at the same time.
Quirk of Zoom.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will go through as briefly as I can. I think a lot of this is, more or less boilerplate that you see in a lot of these. But if we start, and I hope folks here, if you don't have, maybe I should bring it up on the Zoom, and I can share it, I hope. Let's see.
Do you also have extra packets in the front there?
Yeah, why don't we just hand those
We
out?
do have some packets of folks
So if you
here.
want to,
I think it's better to hand that out than to bring up the text, but if you bring up a map, that's good.
yeah.
You want to bring up the map?
I think the map's better than the text. I think it's,
Okay, well, this is not this is taken from the official map here.
well, you decide what needs to come up.
And
I
I
don't know
think
what
that's
you
probably
got.
the better one, because we do have a map here. So if we start with the first page, this is going to be known as Section 23, MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District, MCMOD for short. And that is how it will be on the zoning bylaws of the town. And you can see the purpose there is really to provide additional housing options for the town of Millis, to allow property owners greater flexibility in creating development, mixed-use development included, and really to create a more robust town center. This is something the town has actually been working on, that I know of since 2000 with the master plan, but we've had 2 or 3 plans since then that has said, densify your town center, get it more busy. This is, so as soon as this came out, I said, I saw this as an economic opportunity for the town. So it establishes the applicability of the zoning, which is based on 40A, Mass General Law 40A 3A. It is the underlying zoning that exists now in the town will remain. And what this does is it creates 3 sub-districts. All right, 3 of the, or actually, there's a sub-district A and a sub-district B. Sub-district A is 3 non-contiguous areas. And if you're looking at the map that I have provided here, they would be the tan areas. This map shows you, pretty much shows you what the parcels are, and shows you what the main streets are and where they're located, all located around the town center. Most of the remaining area that is between all this is either developed as commercial or already a mixed use is in an overlay. So these districts will appear in our zoning bylaws as overlay districts. Section C is the definitions that are used in the bylaw. I don't think we need to go over any of those because I will mention some of them as we go along, however. The permitted uses in Section D, as you see, is multifamily housing, dwelling units, multifamily. This is how it's defined already in certain sections of our existing bylaw. Dwelling units, multifamily units, that's Section 2 of the bylaws. In some areas, buildings of greater than 3 units each would be permitted. But again, one of the basic underlying thoughts of this committee when creating this bylaw was we knew that some of this is going to, it's going to be difficult to make large buildings here, and we wanted to make short, and so we limited that. And I think the underlying theory here is to keep Millis looking like Millis, and I think the committee would agree with that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Me. When would you like us to ask questions as each section is presented, or?
I was thinking that
Yeah.
maybe we want to do it that way, rather than go
Yeah.
through the whole thing and
And
then
then
go
be
back.
jumping back and
Yeah.
forth.
So, you know, we've gone through a couple of sections here. Are there any questions, comments on the sections that we've already discussed?
I have a question with regards to section D, the permitted use.
Okay, section D,
DA,
okay.
multifamily buildings of more than 3 units.
Yeah.
The state's guidelines for section 3A provide that multifamily housing is defined as 3 or more. So why are we defining it as more than 3 units? That means a 3-family home wouldn't count
Right.
under this.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I had it down myself. I think I have an answer to that. Alexis, would you happen to know that about that?
I'm just pulling up Millis's bylaw right now to confirm. My only guess would be consistency with a broader definition for the entire bylaw. I can look that up now while you're discussing.
Okay, all right. My feeling was that, and I agree, I have the same question here, is that it shouldn't be equal to or greater than 3.
And that definition does not, there is no definition of that. That's, in our bylaws, I have them in front of me.
Okay,
There is no definition of multifamily being more than 3.
so it's typically 3 or more.
Yes, we actually, our use area regulations distinguish 1-family, 2-family, multifamily dwellings. So there's nothing in our bylaws that says multifamily is more than 3, meaning 4 or greater.
Right,
So,
3 would be a
Yeah,
black
3
hole.
Right, exactly.
I'm thinking that on parcels where, and we look at, you know, the dimensional uses, the dimensional rules here, that there are parcels that are large enough for more than 3 units, and therefore it would be permitted there.
Right,
But
that's why
the
3
best
or
I can
more
come up
is a
with.
way to
Right.
phrase it.
Yeah.
Not more than 3.
Right, not more than 3.
Good.
Because now you, yeah, more than 3 means there's
4.
nothing zoned for 3 units.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's what I've got, 3 or more, or equals to or greater than 3, so,
Thank you.
fine. And we can change that.
Can I go back to?
But I think what we have to do, just for the general purpose, I believe what we're gonna have to do is bring this up at the planning board, so that it's changed, or do we, can we do that now?
I'd bring it,
Because
I'd
this
change
I
it
would,
now.
I would make it
Yeah.
change now and submit it to the
Right.
planning
Yeah.
board before Tuesday's meeting, because,
Because this is the
Every-
committee that would
Exactly.
be presenting
Right,
it.
because
This
otherwise,
is the place to make the edits.
right, otherwise this meeting is kind of a waste of time.
Right.
Okay,
And I'd
A lo-
redline it
Because I
so they
will tell
can-
you, a lot
yeah.
of the questions and things I've highlighted are things that I know
Yeah.
planning board is going to,
Sure.
are gonna question, so.
Okay.
And I'd use a red line or something so that they know that it's been changed if they have a copy of it already.
Right.
Just
Yeah, we
eliminate that.
received, planning board actually
Yeah.
received it before
Yeah.
this committee did.
Yep.
I have a question on section B.
Okay.
It says that we're zoning 256 acres. We had talked about capping the maximum amount of growth at some point to 700, 750 units. Is that in here someplace? And I'm sorry, I haven't read it the way you would, Nicole.
No.
Yeah.
It's
you know,
not.
that's
Yeah.
where I wish John was here to explain. how
Yeah,
that-
I'm a little disappointed that we don't have John here because he's gotten us to this point and
Yeah.
now
No,
we
there's-
are, yeah.
There's nothing in here that caps this
Yeah.
growth.
I did
Yeah.
not see it.
And if there's nothing capping the growth, that's been one of the key points that we've talked about since day one. And zoning N and Hope as commercial, which we have done, you know, that's a good use. We've gotten that one in there. But I mean, if you take it the way it is now, you're going to get the pushback that says this is, you know, 256 acres times however many, whatever density. It's well over 700. Yeah, it's doubles, it's 3,500. Yeah. So I think that, and Alexis, do you know if there's a way to put a cap in this so that we don't have the potential for 3,500 dwelling units when our goal is 700 to 750 dwelling units?
Well, couldn't the town just not approve it, since all you're doing is zoning?
It's by right
No,
zoning.
that's the whole
But it's
point, is
by
that this is
right.
by right.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
yeah.
So without the cap, there's no justification for.
Right.
Denied.
Theoretically, every single parcel that's here could be,
Right.
could be built under this bylaw. Obviously, the chances of that happening are,
Right, but we've got something that's
theoretically,
gonna
you
pass.
could, over the next
Yeah.
10 to 15 years, you could have a lot more than 750 units developed.
And this is gonna pass by the skin of its teeth as it is. And I think that that's a giant hole you can drive a truck through if somebody wants to make an issue with it. So Alexis, is there a way to write this bylaw, so that that's taken into account?
Again, I apologize that I am pinch hitting for John, but I did speak with him beforehand about this, and my understanding is that that would run afoul of the density in the area requirements. There's not just one, because there's several overlapping sets of benchmarks to meet, that area would. You're going to hit the area and the minimum density as well. But does that make sense?
No, quite honestly, no, because, I mean, you're telling us we need to set aside housing for 750 units, and you've proposed a plan that sets aside housing for 3,500 units. And you can see how that's a real tough one for anybody, even those
Yes.
dramatically in favor of this, to endorse. I would be happy if you came in with 800 or 900 units, because it was close, but 3,500, you can drive a truck through that argument. That's the argument that's going to take it down at town meeting where it will fail
No,
if we come in with this bylaw
absolutely.
with that hole in it.
Represents 100% of our current housing stock.
Yeah, that doubles
Right.
the size of our town, and that's not, that might be John's goal, but that's not Millis's goal, you know? So, and we've talked about that since day one, that we can't have something that comes in dramatically higher than 750 units. And here we are sitting at something
That's
dramatically.
over 100% of our current housing.
That more than
Our
doubles the
housing
size
stock
of our town.
Is like
Yeah.
3,200.
Yeah, which is just wrong. I mean, that's, and I'm very disappointed. This has been my complaint since day one. We've got multiple agendas here, and you're not here on the town agenda, which is comply, build adequate housing for our town, but not double the size of our town. I am a strong proponent of this statewide, but when you write laws like this and bylaws like this, it's very hard to endorse it. So,
Yeah, and I think it has something to do with the way the numbers work out, and that's what John was explaining to us.
I understand that, but there has to be
Yeah.
a way
Yeah.
that we can cap it, so it's
Yeah.
not just so open-ended that, exactly.
So that,
So,
once we hit
I mean,
750 or 8 or 900.
no,
no,
no.
That's the only part of it too.
Yeah, you'll need to use a microphone.
Once you hit your housing, you can still keep going. It's not like you cut.
Yeah.
Right.
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 So this is, I think John's agenda was different than ours every step of the way. He's pushed for things that we've talked about that we don't want, and that's what's written in this bylaw. And again, I am a strong proponent of this. I got 3 kids who can't afford houses, and this is a great opportunity for them. But you can't come in here and tell me you got to more than double the size of my town because you put 256 acres into this plan that requires 50. And I understand the way they're zoned, it might be tricky to get to that, but there's got to be some safety net. Otherwise, you're going to get very little support from 3 people on the select board that are very much in favor of it. And I hate being in that crowd. I was not happy to see what's happened across the state, how this has turned into something, but when laws like this or bylaws like this are written, it's hard to support them.
so, I think, I understand kind of where the formulaic aspect of this kind of came into it, but there has to be a way that we can limit that to what we're required to do, which is the 750.
And so
Approximately.
even though I can't address a lot of this directly, I'm taking detailed notes and I'm going to pass this along to John and to Alex, and we'll confer with folks afterwards. So again, apologies that I can't address a lot of how we got to where we are. But your comments are not lost. We're certainly tracking them.
Okay, thanks, yeah.
But doesn't this, to me, I mean, originally, we talked about setting aside a minimum acreage of land to build up to 750 units, right? That's what we're working at. I read this to mean that those 750 units can go any place on this 256 acres. But not that all 256 acres is open to that density.
Unless I
It
see a
is.
sentence in there
It
that
is.
says.
It is.
after-
The way
it
this is,
yeah.
the way this would,
Yeah,
By right, it is.
yes, because this is by right and it is not subject to a special permit. When it's subject to a special permit, when an applicant came into the special permitting agency, whether it's the planning board or the select board, the permitting agency could say, thanks, but we've already met our quota, and so we're not issuing any more special permits. But because this is by right, theoretically, all 253 acres could have up to 15 units per acre, which would total 3,700 additional units. And again, is the likelihood of that happening? No, but is the likelihood that we could end up with 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 over the next 10? Because there are a lot of builders who are saying, once this goes through, they're looking, okay, I'm buying that house, I'm buying this house, and I'm buying this house, and that's
Yeah.
what a lot of businesses are looking to do now. They're just waiting for these bylaws to get passed.
and I think that if I'm correct, part of John's argument why we needed to do so much acreage, was a lot of our lots are below 10,000 square foot, which is the
Right.
minimum. So in individual lots, they're 7,500 square feet, but in aggregate, it's 200 and whatever,
56.
56 acres of land. So I don't know if there's a way to eliminate one of the Pleasant Street, Spring Street chunk or whatever, if there's a way to eliminate one of these chunks. But the problem is, you don't have enough individual lots, from what I remember him saying, that are over 10,000 square feet back in the Curve, Union, Irving Street area. So,
Which gets to how the law is written.
right,
Because you have a lot of small towns with small lots,
yeah.
Yeah.
especially in the downtown area.
I mean, the Purple Lot and the Stony Brook area are large lot. you
Right,
know,
right.
Yeah, but the
But
rest
the
of it
rest aren't.
is tricky.
Right, and if it's written so that a builder has to come in and buy multiple lots to be able to do this, the state may not approve it.
Right,
Right.
It's gonna be difficult to do,
yeah,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for anybody to come in and buy up and.
yeah.
So that's, can we ask town council
You do it in-
Yeah,
if there's, if she has a,
Elizabeth?
I'm sorry, what are you asking me?
is this, would it be possible
And
to
this one here.
place a limit on this bylaw that
That.
allows by right up to a certain number of units, housing units, and then, I don't know, changes the by right portion of it?
So, I mean, by right would be by right, so the only way to really do that, I think, is to limit the area, but then I don't know if that changes
Then we don't need the
density.
numbers.
Right.
really. I didn't, so I reviewed it for the parameters of like what the bylaw says and the legality of what the bylaw says. I didn't actually do
Yeah.
the map out to make sure that the way they calculated it is, or how they calculated it. So I came in kind of at the end for the legal review, but I don't know if there's a way to tweak it so that it wouldn't be so broad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to exclude a lot of those 7,500 square foot lots and then get,
Well,
I mean, if they're
My-
contiguous, if they're in an area that makes.
my question would be, when it refers to quarter acre lot, half acre lot, right now, we have bylaws with regards to subdivisions, with regards to all different zoning issues, that a lot may be currently, it doesn't meet current zonings. It's a non-conforming, a pre-existing non-conforming lot. And as long as the structure that's on there now meets that, it stays there, it's not in violation. But the minute you were to tear it down, you have to meet the new zoning. So the thing is that our zoning bylaws require, the vast majority of these lots are in District RV, which has, for a single-family home, for example, has a required area of 1,500 square feet. A lot of those current lots do not have that 1,500 square feet. So if you were to buy a lot that's 7,500, you couldn't tear it down and put a single-family home on it, because you
Right.
could only keep what's there.
Right.
So the fact that, my question is, the fact that you would have to buy two lots and combine, you'd have to do that if
Right.
if a builder, we have builders here, if they wanted to come in and build a nice big house over on Curve Street, they'd have to buy two contiguous lots to do that.
Right.
So is that something that's, we have to base it on the current configuration of our lots?
That was my understanding. But Alexis, you had your hand up?
You're muted.
muted.
Yes, I
There we
realized I didn't answer the question from a few moments ago. There are just about caps in the district, but you can include a cap on the number of units and have that be consistent with 3A compliance. There's details in there that I can't speak to the specifics of right now, but that is an option in the compliance model.
Okay,
Well, then I think the easiest
So-
point is to,
Cap it.
yeah,
put that in. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Put a
I mean,
cap
because
in
like
it.
I said, I like the concept of it, I'm in favor of it, but you can't tell me you're gonna double the size, more than double the size of the town with this bylaw. Putting 750 units in is something that
Yeah.
I was in agreement with, especially along the side where it's located, because that will build up the commercial area downtown. It'll give us, hopefully, something other than more pizza places, but pizza's good.
We love pizza.
There's
us more
things that
people
can be done.
downtown.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
we could, Jeremy, if you put, we could simply put a cap at 750. It sounds very easy. I'll have to take a look at this, at the guidelines, Alexis, and see what we'd have to go through to do that. But that would be
Right, I
good
don't,
to put
I
in
don't think
here.
that would be the way you do it, because then it's not by right anymore. It has,
Right.
I think it has to be played with a little bit. And that's what I was getting about the model, is that you can't just say up to 750 and then you're done, because it has to be by right zoning, and that wouldn't be by right. It has to be maybe like the height or the amount of units in a building or something to that effect would be how you go about it.
Yeah, and I mean, if it really requires dropping some of the area, and I don't know this like a builder would or zoning.
You can't cap the number.
Yeah, so, I mean, like the Irving, the Van Cleek, that area where they're the super tiny lots, if that was excluded, that might change things and still keep us in compliance. I don't know how spotty I don't know how tight the zoning can be drawn, but it just seems like that's where all the little lots are that are causing us to ignore them, but adding tons of acres.
Well, again, my question would be, do you have to zone this based upon the current layout of each individual lot in our town?
Yeah.
What constitutes the definition of a lot? Is
There
it
you go.
the lot as it exists today? Because if I buy,
what you're saying.
if the chief lives next door to me and I have my lot and I buy his lot, now I can, actually, the town considers those now two lots. I mean, I could legally,
Right.
but I could just hire Dan, put a new plan, and now that's one lot. So what it exists by a deed now, is that the definition in here of what a lot is?
Because that would solve the problem. If you said the definition is 1,500, whatever the definition is, you could drop acres, not the existing lot size, but by
Right.
title, by deed, but.
So
but-
is that, Alexis, is that what, does it have to be? What is, I guess, what is the definition for the lot size? I mean, can we have,
How would
does
we-
it have to go by the way our lots are currently deeded individually at the moment?
I seem to remember speaking to John, that when they ran the model, first of all, they ran the model based on 3 stories as a limit, three units per limit, and that kind of spread things out. And that's what gave us the extra acreage. And it's not so much saying, well, we have 256 acres and 15 per acre gives us, 3,000 more units. So again, we will definitely get back to John and Alex so we can get an answer.
Well, I think
to
the
this.
crux of it is Nicole's question, though, because how do you count a lot? Because none of these things count as a lot if they're torn down anymore in our town, the Van Cleek, Irving
Okay,
sections,
well,
yeah.
So if that's what, if in fact, if that's the case, if what you're saying, they've considered that at 253 acres, and we have a maximum of 3 floors, you're assuming that if you've got then yes, that would be 3 times 253 is 759. But what if that doesn't indicate you could build 3 across and 3 up and have 9
9 units, yeah.
that argument that John was giving this, yeah, and I remember that, you have to expand the density if you're going to limit the height.
Correct.
But if you're building, and again, we have builders in the audience that could speak to this more, but what if you build something that's 3 floors and you have two-family units on the first floor, and two-bedroom units on the first floor, and 3 one-bedroom units, you could end up with more than just 1, 2, 3. You could end up with 3, 6, 9 potential. I mean, it depends on how big or small a unit you were building.
Right.
So by saying we're only going 3 up, doesn't mean you're only going 1 across.
Right,
Theoretically.
We also have, just to answer Nicole's point, I don't know if it's an answer, but we also have dimensional requirements for 10,000 square feet for what?
Well, that's the
building,
minimum
right?
lot size.
Minimum lot size.
That's the
So
minimum
we
lot
have-
size is 10,000
So if you
square
have-
feet.
By 2 lots and you have 20,000 square feet, then you can't put 9, right? Would that be right?
Well, it would, I mean, if you have, no, 10,000 square feet is just telling you your minimum.
That's your minimum.
yeah.
I mean, what goes on the inside of those 4 walls? All this bylaw does
Yeah.
is tell you how big and where, and how much land and how much building. What a
how
builder puts on the inside, I mean, it gives you a maximum density of 15 units per acre. So if you made some of these units smaller, you could definitely get more than 3 units.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
And
depends on how, I mean, we can ask our building inspector.
It's a building commissioner's nightmare.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, let's even cut back a little bit on the hyperbole, just because I went there first. 256 acres, let's assume that only 60% of it's built, because you got roads and everything else and setbacks. It's still a couple thousand units, which is still twice what I'd be comfortable with, you know? So it is too large of a number, but I'm not sure how to get it down, and nor do I have any expertise to even guess. You know?
Yeah, well, that
But I
was
thought
what we
that's what
needed John for.
that's what we had John for. Yeah. And I still am, I look at the Stony Brook as a wide open area. If it was torn down and rebuilt, I look at the Ann and Hope, and I look at the old GAF factory. If those 3 areas could be used at higher density, then we have something. The Van Cleek Irving, if that's those tiny lots, maybe we drop that off and that cuts back on some stuff. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with a solution that would possibly, limit the growth to something that is what we intended when we got into this.
I would like to get whether it is a definition, I'd like to get an understanding whether it's from town council or whether it's from the state. Really, do we have to, if we have lots that are currently laid out that are less than our minimum now, are those just all gonna be not taken into consideration?
I mean, if they were excluded from this possible buildup, but as you pointed out, somebody buys 2 of them, you're in the plan now. So that's,
The
yeah.
answer to that is those non-conforming lots are not inherently not by right, and so those are subtracted from the totals.
Yeah, what happens
What
if
if I
you
buy
combine,
2?
yeah, what if you buy 2 of them?
The compliance model just considers the lots as they currently are.
So if I bought 2
That-
of them, I could build my houses, but if I only owned 1 of them, I couldn't. That's why we have to have 256 acres.
Okay, but if
That's
you
we're
buy,
back to the same problem.
but if you buy 2 of them and now you've got a
Yep.
10,000 square foot minimum and you buy 15,000 square feet and you can build,
Yeah,
we're gonna,
But we can't
potentially
use
this
it for the
is.
model.
yeah. You can't count,
You
so that's
can't
the
use it
problem.
for the
yeah.
model, but the problem is that it's gonna be calculated in
Yeah.
what our potential end
Build out
game
is.
is.
Yeah,
Right, in real life, I mean,
yeah.
it's used but for the model for the state.
And
They
that's
don't
the
count.
problem. I mean, if the model was based on the 15,000 square foot lot size, then that completely, forgetting the existing lot configurations, that changes everything on this calculation. You'd lose large swaths of land that you wouldn't have to include. Because that would assume that people are able to buy and put together.
All that,
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah,
all that.
I mean, you could take that whole thing out and say that if you just bought a bunch of these, you can build. you
Right,
know?
right,
Yeah, which is
Right.
Nicole's theoretical.
right,
Yeah.
but it's not that far-fetched.
No, it's,
But is by right still doesn't mean that whatever is proposed is automatic, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it is.
So-
That's
Yeah.
what, when you say by
Well,
right, it
that it's
means.
gonna
You
happen.
can have it there.
Yes, right, it doesn't mean that we're gonna have builders come running in and buying up every piece of property.
Right, or proposing densities that don't work, right? Isn't that still, doesn't that still require some sort of approval?
No, that's what
No.
by
That's
right
what by
means,
right
is
is.
that you don't have to get approval from,
I understand, so, I understand that you're permitted to, with that use in by right, but, you have to meet a height, right, restriction, you have to meet
Yep.
sidelines, front lines, wetlands, right? So you can't look at a parcel that's just 2 or 3 acres and say, well, I'm gonna put that many units there because it's by right. Correct?
right, you can do up to, right, if you had a 3-acre parcel, you could do up to 45 units by right.
yeah. But
And
gotta
then
get
you
it to
have
fit
to
the
deduct
parcel.
based upon the
Yeah.
roads and all of that, but it's,
So I don't think you can say at 256 acres that you could expect to get thousands of units.
you could.
It allows
eas-
for the potential of
It
it.
does, yeah. And let's not forget, we could come up with the best idea in the world. But it's got to pass town meeting, and the first question is going to be how many houses are going to be allowed to be built? And if we say someplace between 1,000 and 2,000 additional, that's way different than saying 750. You know, and I'll make a strong argument for 750 to 1,000. I can't make an argument for 2,000, you know?
Well, we have to know why
Yeah.
it is this.
Yeah.
And have a strong argument as to why this is what makes
Right.
sense, because when you first look at it, it's like, oh, my goodness, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
How can you predict? How could you predict what
You
you're gonna
can't,
get?
Yeah.
that's the whole
Yeah.
point,
So
is you
to
can't.
say any number, really. I mean,
Well, you can say what's
really
allowed.
get is what you were required to build,
Yeah.
which was 750.
No, you can say what's allowed, what this plan would allow. And it's not going to be the 3,700 that we came up with first, and it's not going to be the 750 that's required. It's going to be something north of 750 and something well below 3,700. So,
Can you
Yes,
state
hi,
your name and your
uh,
address?
Tom McDonough, 40 Bullard Lane, Millis. Couple questions. I don't think you calculated in the 256 acres wetlands, because you have to subtract those out. So I think you're going to lose a lot of acreage on Pleasant Street and behind the Catholic Church. There's a lot of wetlands there. So those aren't true, I don't think. And secondly, my other concern was, is this like a zero lot line construction, or?
No, I believe there's setbacks.
there's
They're
setbacks.
very minimal,
Minimal.
extremely
So-
minimal, which I'll be, that wasn't one of my
So it
questions.
seems to me that a 40B would be more preferable for a developer than go through this process.
Probably.
Yeah.
And until we meet our threshold, that's always going to be an issue.
Right,
And as we
No,
build
the
more
40B
units, the threshold will get further away.
right.
And I guess this goes back to Alexis too. If we had a number that you guys calculated out that this would impact, taking into account wetlands, setback and all that, I'd feel a whole lot better. The fact that John is not here to defend his plan and explain his plan is just putting me over the edge. I mean, because we've been through this for, what is this, our 10th meeting or something? And we put a lot of time into this, and tonight is the night that we have the plan that we're taking to vote. And we don't have anybody here to explain it in detail. No offense, Alexis, I understand your pinch hitting.
Let me ask you, who's John?
He works for
No,
MAPC.
No offense taken at all.
Yeah.
MAPC.
And I
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
appreciate
Oh,
your
okay,
concern.
okay.
MAPC, who could
Well-
not make it tonight.
Oh.
Will John be here for the planning board meeting?
I'm hoping so.
if he's not, don't do the planning board meeting. I'll just say that now. And
I was
we,
just gonna say, I don't think this is ready for the.
no. I mean, and the sad part is it could be ready for the planning board if John was here to say, with wetlands and everything else, Craig, you're looking at 850 units, that's the max list. I'd go, we're done, I'm good, you know, but,
I think wetlands,
what?
they do the wetlands overlay already in there.
They did pull out the wetlands on their calculations,
Yeah.
but we just
But
don't
they're in the
have
plan, yeah.
kind of
They're in
that
that
to
256
inform
acres.
what we're looking
Well,
at.
wouldn't that be nice to have that amount
Wouldn't
of
it?
acreage
Yes.
that we can eliminate from the
Yeah.
256?
Yeah,
And if they've done the overlay, then they know what it is.
yeah, and the setbacks and other things,
Right.
that,
Yep.
so again, that's my frustration, I was expecting to come here and endorse, or not, but not have 1,000 questions that aren't answerable.
Well, maybe we can go through everything, highlight everything, and then whoever
Yep.
gets in touch with John can just go bullet by bullet and get those answers, and maybe we can be ready.
Yeah, I think we need to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're making
What
a
I can't do
recording
is
of it, so he'll have to.
I can
record
document
this.
all of these and make sure that you get a response tomorrow.
Great, thank you so
Yeah,
much,
thank you.
Alexis.
Great.
All right, so we went up to D. Do
Yep.
we have other questions up to D?
Okay.
Permitted uses.
That's new what I do with my glasses. I'm not wearing them, right? So we're up to D, and talk about the permitted uses for A, well, we just went through A. The sub-district B, which is the mixed use, you see the ground floor would, of all the mixed use units would contain the commercial space. And you'll see the box that tells you what sort of space, what sort of businesses could go in there. And there's, it also allows for special permits, uses in there. And that would be up, of course, to the planning board, since the planning board would be the authority here. It talks about, let's see, it talks about accessory uses. In this case, we talk about parking, some restrictions on parking, and that home occupation could be part of this, part of the commercial.
hey guys in the back, can you either move in the hall or, thanks.
Did we have another question?
Critiquing this second.
Okay, we'll critique in the hall and come back. We'll critique at the mic and share.
We move to the dimensional standards, some of the questions, one of the questions.
Oh, we have a question?
Go.
Yep, go ahead.
So under these, what are personal services?
Oh, keep it down.
Let's see, offices, professional, medical.
Is that like spa, beauty
So
shop?
that
I guess,
things
yeah,
like
maybe
that?
like a spa, physical therapy maybe, and,
Yeah, I don't, medical is down further.
Yeah, office, professional office,
yeah.
medical.
sounds like a general catch-all.
Yeah, what is a personal?
Personal.
Maybe
I'm
that's,
assuming
yeah,
barber shop.
hairdresser.
Nail
How about a
salon.
tax
Yeah.
service? Like a tax service?
Well, that would fall under professional office.
Okay,
Yeah, I think personal service is probably a hairdresser, nail salon, spa.
okay.
Things like that. I don't know. We don't have a definition, right? Is there a definition in the bylaws as they stand? No. Okay.
I don't think so.
I like having definitions within our documents. That way,
Yep.
it's less arguing. Exactly. Because could, exotic dancing be personal services, you know?
It's not zoned, yeah, that's.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, but if we could add, you know,
But,
as
you know,
as you've
it's a
made
slippery slope.
examples in everything else, I think personal service, including hairdresser, nail salon.
Or
that-
eliminated? Because everything else.
What?
Already zoned for that.
Yeah, but you never know what they're gonna talk about. Decide it's a slippery slope. So yes, I would prefer that personal services has a little more definition with it.
All right, moving on, dimensional standards, and I guess, I believe this gets added, well, it will become part of the bylaws. 10,000 square foot, again, these are minimums, well, no, that's 10,000 square foot, yeah, it's a minimum there. 3 stories, we said 35 feet, which is pretty much, I'm looking at the building, pretty much what we have in most of these, okay.
You can
You
talk
can
at the
head up to the
mic.
mic. All right.
Except for Yeah, except for GAF.
And I think these are fairly standard, the floor area ratio, the lot coverage, and the standards for the front footage,
Madam Chair?
side yards and such.
Yes, Ms. Riley?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna make waves again. Again, most of this is most of these lots are RV lots. And the current setbacks, where you have, I mean, number one, a 20-foot frontage, there's no such thing as a lot. There is no lot in this town that has a 20-foot frontage. You know, this legally, thank you. I mean, generally, it's it's 100 feet. So 20-foot frontage is it's less than the distance of this desk. Number one, I've never seen setbacks that have minimum and maximum. So where you have a front yard setback of a minimum of 6 feet and a maximum of 10 feet. Just to put this in perspective, I think I would venture to guess that there are very few houses in this town where the front door is at the ground level. You have at least 2 steps.
Right.
Your landing has a minimum under the building codes of 36 inches.
Correct.
Each step has a rise minimum of 12 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have 2 steps and a landing, you're talking 60 inches, which is 5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
If your minimum setback is 6 feet, you're gonna step off and you're gonna have 1 foot from the end of your steps to the street.
Mm-hmm.
How is that considered safe? And if the maximum setback is 10 feet, you've got, and these are supposed to be designed for families, and you've got the end of your steps and you've got 5 feet before the road. And again, you've got side setback, you've got a rear setback, 20 feet, side setbacks of 15 feet, and now you're gonna say you can build up to, theoretically, you can build up to 6 feet on all 4 sides, as long as you've got 20%, it says 20% open space, but as you go on and you define open space, terraces counts as open space, rooftops open. So you don't necessarily have 20% of open space, or you could build around and have a courtyard in the middle. We're putting this in some of the smallest areas in town, and you're going to tell all of these neighbors, I can build from my house to your lot is gonna be the length, the size of Chief's, if Chief lays down on the ground? I mean, that's, and you, but.
One chief.
Thank you, 6 feet now.
But my point is, and you want
Shrinking.
people, and people are gonna approve that? We're shrinking, what is, I guess, so my point is, other than to just, like I said, I'm not trying to throw a wrench into this, but I've gone through this based upon our current zoning bylaws, and I just anticipate, what is our answer to the planning board? Because let me tell you, the planning board's gonna have a field day with that. Even if and I will sit back, because I can tell you the planning board members are gonna have a field day with that. And they're not gonna recommend it.
It is super tight, and I know from personal experience what it feels like to be next to a building like that, because one of our offices, they built right up to the property line next door, and
Right.
it hasn't gone well.
And none of this falls on 109. So this is, as the chief just pointed out, you have a footnote, a front yard setback up to 20 feet is permitted for parcels abutting Main Street 109. Well, that's only GAF.
Yeah,
And in Hope, that's the only parcel
Yeah.
that's abutting 109.
well,
So what are our
these
setbacks
over
in the rest?
Or there's, there's like
Over
maybe
here.
3 other, okay, you're right, 3 other lots, 3 or 4 other lots down. But,
Where did these come from?
what, these bylaws?
These setbacks.
Setbacks from MAPC?
Based on,
That's my question.
Yeah.
If we don't have a valid reason for this, I can't, again, how do we sell it to the town?
Yeah,
So what
What
do we have
number
for a
would you like?
setback on the rest of the?
All of that division, you have 40-foot minimum setback for a front setback, 15 on the side, and 20 in the rear.
But we don't have a recommendation from them everywhere else except for 109.
Yeah.
It's just 6 to 10, and like I said,
Yeah.
so you've got a minimum of 6-foot setbacks on all 4 sides, and a maximum of 10 for front and.
I mean, I just think it's way too tight.
Yeah.
Well, and by saying you have a maximum of 10, you're not giving a
Yeah,
builder the option to try to put it in a position where he's limiting,
Yeah.
or I should say, he or she is trying to, what if, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my house is 20 feet back. I had to get variances to do it. It's a pre-existing condition. When I put the addition on, I had to prove it wasn't getting any worse.
Have a question?
Peter Kofopoulos, Chairman of the Zoning Board. Just to expand on these setbacks just a little bit, there's one factor that really concerns me, is that you have the potential here for large buildings 12 feet apart. And I'm suggesting that possibly the fire department might have some real concerns over the impact of having a serious fire in one building going to another building, to another building, to another building. So I think the whole issue of setbacks, certainly side setbacks, and get rid of this range. It's got to be a minimum setback,
Yeah.
whatever that number may be, but it's certainly not 6 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that 6 to 10 is a little nutty.
I would think they should have at least had a conversation with Mike, with others,
Or with fire chief.
right? Before they just came up.
So what would be our recommendation, assuming that, the numbers work, all of this? What would we like to see on these parcels for setbacks?
I mean, I understand that maybe the current setbacks as we currently have in that zone are, if you were to use them, you, again, would have a problem with the density.
Correct.
But I think there's a huge difference between our current 40-foot setback
Right.
and 6 feet.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, again, a lot of these neighborhoods do not have sidewalks.
Right.
Right.
They don't have, I'm not a professional developer. I don't know what the appropriate number would be, but I think it's gotta be a lot more than 10%, than 10 feet.
I would think in the front, 20 would be
least
a
20.
reasonable
I
number.
can tell you 20 works. You have a nice little garden, you're a little
I've
way
seen
back.
your house.
Yeah.
I've been to your house.
You can make 20 work. Thank you for the zoning variance 30 years ago.
Go ahead.
Maybe we should write in what the current zoning is, and then bring it to John's attention, and maybe even with Mike's input, come to whether it should be what it is now, or maybe there is some sort of new number that works, that's greater than
I'm
this
assuming
number.
these numbers, again, have to do with the density.
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
But we still have to take into consideration safety issues. We can't design this so that, number one, we're providing a headache for our building inspector, and number two, we're creating a safety hazard for every other resident around these lots.
Well, this is coming out of the Executive Office of Livable Communities, and this would make a community that's not particularly livable.
I mean, yeah, especially with no sidewalk and all the other situations up in, all the other things up there in that area.
Which is why the 256 acres might be accurate, because you may not be able to get it. But I think if you wrote the current setbacks and frontage required now in that zone, then at least you could look at what it is now. You could look at what they're proposing. So if the frontage now is 100 feet and they're proposing 20 feet, then maybe 50 or 75 is the number, or maybe it stays at 100. And maybe Mike participates in that a little bit and shed some light on that.
This is on the state level, don't forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's.
But if we're allowing 20 along
The frontage.
109
And then
for the
you've got-
frontage, I would expect 20 throughout all of the parcels would be a reasonable amount.
Oh, for the setback,
front
yeah.
setback.
For the front
I was looking
setback.
at, I was looking at the frontage, and 20 feet with two 6-foot setbacks, it's an
Yeah,
interesting house.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
Although tiny homes are coming into play. people are
Well, I mean,
interested in
I
tiny.
would assume you're talking about 20 feet.
Yeah.
If you do this,
Right.
you are actually advocating, in my mind, for really bizarre.
Yep.
You're allowing for
Yeah.
someone to come in and really start chopping up
absolutely.
and creating, okay, I can get 20%, like, years and years ago, you had this whole thing about pork chop lots. And you would have, if you would have a rectangle lot, and you have to have frontage. So with 20-foot frontage, you could take a rectangle lot, and now you've got, like, if you had 100 and, you could chop them up into all these really bizarre shaped.
With driveways.
Like, you used to have you'd have a lot, and then you'd have this little driveway that then opened to a bigger lot. And now you can't, a lot of times, you can't have what's called a pork chop lot. You have to have frontage. And that's, you know, then again, if you go back to this, now you're starting to, we're gonna start looking like downtown Boston. Where
Well,
here's my
Bill,
house and your
Bill.
house is. So I think the whole idea of a 20-foot frontage line is,
Yeah.
I've got an even bigger problem than that than 6-foot side backs. And I
Yeah.
promise I'm not gonna be this argumentative through the rest of
oh,
the
I don't
evening.
believe that, but that's okay.
No, but,
That's what we're
Yeah.
here for.
yeah, I think that taking the existing bylaw numbers and putting them in is, makes sense to look at to start. And then if they're cut in half, or, you know, if they're, then you've got a basis. Because I think you could
Right.
live with a 20-foot setback. I'm gonna defend that till the day I die. It works, I like it.
Yeah.
But the frontage, 100 feet, maybe 50, you know, that might work. I'm not a builder, I don't know, but that might work.
Yeah. The frontage part I don't know as well as others. Only had to deal with it a few times. But the setbacks are definitely an issue. And I know what it feels like to be next to a building that's built right up to the lot line, basically, with no parking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, the side yard, you know, if that was a minimum of 10 or something. 15's the code now,
Yeah.
minimum of 10, setback 20, frontage 50, maybe it's half.
Right, but certainly not with a maximum.
No maximum. We don't like
That
maximum.
doesn't make sense to allow for something that works within the neighborhood, increases density.
Yeah.
But then you end up with this kind of Frankenstein building
And if these things are
to fit
addressed
the minimum,
properly.
or the maximum, you know?
Yeah,
It's just
if those
weird.
setbacks and other things are addressed properly, it does start bringing down that total number too, which addresses the first issue that
Yep.
I've spoken enough about.
All right, can we go through, we have the, number 4, multi-building lots. Let's see, what's table 3? What's that?
So we're still on, what?
This is,
Where we're at.
yeah, we're still on dimensional standards.
Dimensional
I think.
standards, right, and the exceptions thereof.
I'd move past those because I didn't like them.
Yeah,
Going to off-street parking, if there's no
Yeah.
questions on that.
yeah.
Actually, sorry,
You have-
I did lie.
Go right
Under
ahead.
exceptions, limitation on height of buildings shall not apply to chimneys, ventilations, I get all of that. Towers, silos, spires, rooftop shade structures, again, you're just adding more shade that's going to, more blockage of, I mean, really, in Millis, we need towers on a building, we need silos. I don't think, ornamental features on top of a building in a little residential neighborhood, I think these things are just gonna overshadow the next door, their abutting neighbors. I don't know, I personally don't think those things should be allowed. yes, have ventilation, allow for chimneys, and there's a provision, the next provision, renewable energy. It's not gonna consider if they wanna put, solar panels, that shouldn't be calculated into the housing. But, I mean, a tower, a cupola,
Well, sometimes you need a tower for the elevator, if you have an elevator.
An elevator shaft tower goes
Yeah.
on top.
okay, but then can we consider that, can we specifically state an elevator tower?
Yeah.
Or system tower,
Yes,
something like that.
something like that, as, like
Mechanical systems,
rooftop
yeah.
shade structures? So,
Spires, I want a spire.
Yeah, I know. That
I
was
I would,
great on my
any,
Dutch
these
Campbell.
exceptions, I fully support these exceptions when they are mechanical.
Yeah.
Not decorative, that's
Yeah.
just gonna add more overshadowing of the neighbors.
Then that's maybe what you say.
Yes, just anything that's
Mechanical.
mechanical,
Right, that's.
right,
Yeah,
It should
that
be worded
covers it
more
all.
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
Yep.
Are you all gonna hate me when we're done with this?
No. This is why we need you.
That's why John's not here, because John would hate me at the end of this meeting. Sorry, Alexis. She's gonna be like, I'm never going back to Millis unless that woman is not there.
No, that's better to have this conversation now than in front of the planning board.
Yeah. Or at town meeting.
Yeah, and honestly, if this isn't together, it doesn't go to town meeting, we got into November if we have to also.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
all of that, if it's in renewables, such
Yeah.
installations
getting-
not
It's
create.
important.
Yeah, you're not gonna get 2 bites if it goes down in flames.
And actually, the chief just brought out a good thing under exceptions for renewable energy. There is a sentence, such installations shall not create a significant detriment to abutters in terms of noise or shadow. I mean, we could add that up
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess if you put something in the middle of the roof that's not overshadowing the neighbors, then that's fine.
Okay,
Yep, I like that
So, yeah,
phrase, to
adding
put that in number
adding
5,
just
too.
adding that sentence to number 5 as well.
yeah.
No?
Problematic for me.
Okay.
Well, come up here and tell us why.
After you build it. You gotta.
I wish I had a movie mic.
Could sit in the front row.
It's a long walk.
You have to be careful. Mike Giampietro, Building Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
When you're writing these bylaws, and especially this one, and there's been problems throughout the whole state. Building officials have been going to these meetings, and what we see coming down the pike is a big problem for the building commissioner and the zoning officer, we're the zoning officer as well. So when you come up with definitions, you have to be very specific, because if you leave it broad, once it's built, then you're gonna have complaints, coming in left and right. People who are gonna be renting these apartments are gonna be complaining about the neighbors, but this says this, that says that, and it's gonna be a nightmare, quite honestly. Also, I just want to, enlighten you on the setbacks. Peter's 100% correct. You should just have a number, not 6 to 12, because if you're the builder, I was a builder, I'd go right to 6. I wouldn't even think about 12, right?
Yeah.
How much money can I make on this project? How can I make it work? How can I get it approved to make as much money as I possibly can by building it? So when you're creating these regulations, you have to sort of kind of put that back of your head, right? Be the builder. Say, well, I shouldn't do this because that leaves it wide open and then, to get more density, right? But I just want to reiterate, when you go through this, to make sure whatever you can do to be more specific, like on definitions. Definitions are very important, right? You have current definitions in our zoning bylaw, which what I'm hearing is going to overlap on what you do here. So the state should be looking at what you have existing, what you're going to propose, what are the impacts of each definition to the long-term effect when they start building these things. Because then the building inspector is going to be the one who's going to get inundated with it, and then it goes back up to the zoning board, and then it gets to be a big circus. So, just want the committee to be aware of those issues as I hear you talk and, try to mitigate this thing out. Again, as a resident, 750 units is gonna impact, no matter what units you put, it's gonna impact schools, fire, building department, DPW, everything, no matter what you do. So, the best thing is to try to minimize, and what's the minimum requirement set forth by the Commonwealth when they come up with this regulation, right? Why go over something? Why go more than what the state's mandating you to do? You can get a lot more revenue from other buildings being built, and your assessed value will be a lot bigger and better, and you make the town look more favorable. I'm not saying I'm against it, but so what I am saying is try to just stay against what the minimum standards are gonna be, and try to make it work. Thank you.
Mike, is that the BVRS meetings, that stuff's going on?
Nope, no, it's economic development, it's got nothing to do with the building officials ourselves are talking amongst ourselves when we have monthly building inspectors meetings or roundtables or whatnot, as all this stuff comes to fruition, right? And what problems some building commissioners are running against, when these proposals are coming down the pike and they get involved in it, so.
So it might be better to keep some of the bylaws in place the same.
Yeah,
If they're
what you
working out,
have now, you don't even change one word like and or but, because people argue over a, and the building official is the one who's gonna go to town council, and then, one thing leads to another, and then go to the appeals board, and then, you argue the definition of height. What was it, about 20 years ago when I was here, I had a big issue with someone had come into town, wanted to build their own house, and what they designed on a set of plans, they were over the height requirement. And that person who wanted to do that was an attorney. So, 3 months battling, we went and, fought over the definition of height, right? Which was, all he had to do was put more fill on the right side, on the east side of his building, and then the average grade plane would have come down and he would have just made it. But, these type of things, the ordinary person doesn't understand, how zoning works, right? Even people who are supposed to understand how zoning works don't understand how it works. So it gets to be right at the front office and the building official. And one building official leaves, another building official comes in, they have to learn all about it, and they make their own decisions. May not be the same as the other building official, so that can become problematic. That's why to keep it, uniform is, and the benefit for the community than, having say something different somewhere else.
So we have to define significant detriment in terms of noise and shadow. If we're gonna say that, overshadowing a neighboring property is gonna be a problem, then there has to be
Yeah,
a
what's that
definition
mean?
as to
Right.
what is significant,
Well,
or eliminate.
Eliminate it.
Yeah.
I would
that's what
eliminate
was
the
gonna say,
silos,
that-
spiros. and
Yeah,
what-
with the
Yeah.
exceptions, I would eliminate it and say like you did,
Yes.
only mechanical on the roof.
Yeah, period.
Right.
That's it,
Then we
period.
don't
Yeah.
give
Just
them any
mechanical.
options.
That's
Yeah.
a definition we can handle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
limitation on height of building should not apply to chimneys?
Mechanical.
Chimneys,
To a
ventilators.
mechanical.
What-
Mechanical.
Yeah,
Just
just,
mechanical.
Just-
Chimneys
A
fall
chim-
into
A
mechanical.
chimney's part of a mechanical system, Bob.
Yeah. That's up to these guys.
It's a simple mechanical system, but it's there.
Just a little education.
Towers,
Mechanical
Mechanical
tower.
system.
mechanical, okay, so.
I think we're saying that,
Mechanical.
Mechanical
yeah,
system.
I think if
Shall
you,
apply to
I think
mechanical
if you
systems.
take out all of, I think what they're saying, take out all of these
Yeah.
examples
And just.
and just
You
say,
put
the limitation
mechanical-
on height of buildings shall not apply to mechanical systems.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Or which features are in no way used for living purposes. Well, no, you don't want to, just period.
Just
Mechanical
period, just end it
systems,
right there,
period.
yeah, end it right there.
And then
Yeah.
again, that second statement we talked about, such installation shall not create a significant detriment to abutters in terms of, we can still have that in there, because we don't want the mechanical stuff to cast shadows or be noisy.
Right, especially with the new,
Well, it-
How are you gonna do that?
heating systems. And-
What do you mean?
Mechanical system has to be the mechanical system.
Yeah, but if you can put it in the middle of the building versus the edge next to the
Location.
street.
Yeah, I
or
think if you
something,
can
yeah.
put it, such
Yeah.
installation shall not create an overshadow, should not cast a shadow off the building.
And that would be determined by the building official, if it's a problem. Then if somebody doesn't like it, they can appeal it to the ZBA, right? So the building official
There you go.
can, then rule on, err on the side of caution, and
Yeah.
always, like I tell all new building officials, push everything toward the zoning board. Let them make a decision. There's 5 or 7 people there instead of you all alone. So you got different people looking at it and coming up with their own, decisions.
So do you think we should make a statement about casting shadows or leave that out?
I would leave it out if it was
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Okay.
Is
What time of day?
anybody,
Time of year.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say.
The sentence
Exactly.
in paragraph 6.
December
that
21st,
says,
everything
Such
has a
installation
shadow.
shall not create significant detriment. You want that also up in,
No, that's what we're saying, leave that out
Leave
of,
it out.
Leave it
out
out.
of 5. Leave it in 6.
leave it in 6.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about having it both, I will leave it, leave it at 6. Thank you, Mom.
anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, let's talk parking.
Why don't you sit there?
Before we go much further, what's your thoughts
Yeah.
on parking? Yeah.
All right.
Back up if you need.
Bob, if I could provide some clarity on the personal services,
Yes.
I did require that some definitions be added, but that was one that was in the Webster Dictionary, and I don't know if it would be helpful to hear it or if you'd rather it be spelled out. But it's a service based on the intellectual or manual efforts of an individual rather than a saleable product of his or her skills. So, because it was defined by Webster, I didn't add a definition there, but there was others that weren't defined that I did add in definitions.
I think it makes sense to add in a definition. We have our building inspector coming back. Yeah.
Mike Giampietro, building commissioner, 21 years. So when we look at our use regulation table and what can be used in that zoning district, our current zoning bylaws are kind of broad in some of the definitions for, what's an office, what's a professional office. It's up to the building official to make that determination. So if somebody's going to propose a use in a certain zoning district that's sort of kind of cloudy, we would always put it somewhere because use regulations are not allowed, right? Use variances are not allowed in Millis. So if we don't put it anywhere, then you can't do it. So I would rather put it somewhere and then say you can do it and have somebody appeal it, right? So like professional office, it's wide open. What's a professional office? Well, anybody who comes in and says that, I want to have my offices there. All right, what do you do? I'll ask them. What's your office? What's your nature of your business? I'll have them write a narrative, all right? So, go back, write a narrative, what is exactly you do, so I can have backup just in case anybody appeals it or anybody questions it. So, to get down to like professional, and then you start listing items under a professional service. I mean, you come up with a lot of items, a lot of uses that can be called professional, right? So, my opinion would be, leave it, say it's a professional service like it is, and let the building official make the determination whether it falls under the professional category. And the building official can simply ask for a narrative describing what they're gonna do there. And then then if anybody wants to appeal that, it can go to the ZBA and get the attorneys involved. So, I mean, just something how it's, we generally look at it. If it was a town that would allow use variances, then, then they can go get a use variance, right?
Right.
But we don't allow use variances, so, I'm not one to throw somebody out just because I wanna put it somewhere. I wanna give them the option to go through the system to make sure that, you know, this person wants to do business here, right? We wanna try to welcome them into the town. Where can I put them to welcome into the town, right? And one thing that always worked good for me was having someone who's gonna do that, create a narrative, so it's part of the application.
Okay. All right, so we'll just leave it as personal services?
Madam Chair?
Yes?
On our use table, we have all the, you know, lists all these different uses and where they're at. We actually, under retail and services, there isn't anything that lists spas, hairdressers. There is other personal and consumer service establishment.
Okay.
So I think actually saying personal or, you know, personal and consumer, you're gonna, that's gonna go along with the language that's already in
Use the same language.
the,
Okay.
in the bylaws.
I like using the same language wherever we
Yes.
can. It's particularly helpful when we do edits. So personal and consumer and other consumer services?
I just closed it. Sorry. Other personal and consumer service establishments.
Okay.
So do we want to put that here as well? Or just leave this as personal services?
I would say personal and consumer
Services.
services,
Services, because that's defined.
instead of, personal and consumer.
All right, can we move on to off-street parking?
All right, well, we did discuss this in the past. We have I know we're always used to minimum numbers of spaces, and here we're talking about maximum 2 spaces per dwelling for multifamily, residential within mixed use, 2 spaces per dwelling, and 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet, commercial gross floor area for the commercial uses within the mixed-use building.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I apologize again, because you have to remember I'm also an attorney, so it's my job to look for the worst-case scenario. Following maximum number of off-street parking spaces means potentially, and granted, a builder's got to be able to sell it, potentially you could have no off-street parking. If you list a maximum of 2 parking spaces, if you have no minimum, potentially the builder could just not put off-street parking. So the idea of a maximum but no minimum, to me, is absurd. There is nowhere in town where we do not have a minimum parking. We have every home, we have dwelling units have a required 1 off-street parking per bedroom unit, or 2 off-street parking per 2-bedroom unit or greater. So you could have a minimum of 1 parking space, you know, even for a 2-bedroom, because potentially in some of these things you're assuming, you know, parents but to have no minimum, to me, again, considering where these neighborhoods are, you're gonna have all of this on-street parking. People are gonna have to park on the street.
With no sidewalks.
With no sidewalks and with, you know, if you've only got 10 feet from your front door, they're gonna, you know, and I mean, look at, if you've got on-street parking, Chief's not gonna get a truck down there. You're gonna barely get a car down there in the evenings.
Chief will get a truck down there.
One way or the other.
Not
Would the
safe.
maximum just be made minimum?
My understanding
mean-
was that the state doesn't allow us to put minimum parking requirements. That's what I
Is that-
remember hearing from John.
For commercial, for mandatory commercial use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
why
for
don't we just
resident-
make it in conformity with our other, what you just read? You know, 1 space per bedroom, minimum required, or, maximum required two, is what it sounded like to me.
It's, yeah, if you have one bedroom unit, you have to have one parking space.
Yeah.
If you have a two bedroom or greater, you have to have two parking spaces.
Yeah.
And I understand with some of this, and of course, that could go against if you've got 3 units and now you've got to have 6 parking spaces, but I think there has to be a minimum.
Yeah.
Whether you,
Especially since these streets where we're talking about have no on-street parking.
they have
to
no
speak of.
on-street parking, they have no sidewalks.
Yeah.
Could the minimum be per building, not per unit? So it's like, you know, one space for 80, I don't know, you know.
If you do it by square footage of the building, then that could be altered if you have a building that has 3 units versus a building that has.
Units by number of units.
Yeah, I think you need to have at least 1 parking space per unit. And again, you have to assume the builder's gonna wanna sell them. And a builder, you know, people, if you've got, you know, if you've got somebody that's moving in and saying, I really need 2 parking spaces, and you're only given 1 per unit, then they may not buy it. And I know the state is trying to minimize the number of vehicles, they're trying to minimize the impervious
Yeah.
surface, but you have to at least have a minimum of 1
So if we set
parking
as a
space per
minimum of
unit.
1, eliminate maximum, set as a minimum of 1 per dwelling unit, that kind of addresses it.
Yeah,
At
I don't
some
know why
level.
we need a maximum.
Right.
I believe the maximum is because of the environmental situation and because of stormwater runoff, creating more, as you said, Nicole, creating more impervious space could run afoul of the town's stormwater runoff.
We'll get the lot
Policy.
setbacks from 6 to 15.
So we just
and
need to have
get a dr-
an
parking
extra
spot.
column of minimum spaces and maximum spaces.
Yeah, you could
Minimum
require
and
a minimum of 1 parking space, maximum of 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Because
Also-
again, like our dwelling, you are allowed to have more, but the requirement for a 4-bedroom house in Millis is only a driveway that's big enough to put 2 cars.
Right.
Right.
So I think a minimum of 1, maximum of 2.
And commercial is spelled wrong in the table.
Miracle.
Chimerical. It's an
There you
easy
go.
one.
For you.
It's easy to type.
Yeah.
In commercial, can you put charging stations in by right? Car charging stations? Any permit to do that?
That's
shake your head or
that
not.
doesn't fall, the by right in this is for housing
Housing,
units.
yeah.
So, but when you're covering parking, you have 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet.
Commercial, if they're in the sub-district where there's mandatory mixed use, the state does not allow, commercial, parking minimums. That said, you certainly could remove the parking maximum for commercial. But if you're including mandatory mixed use, that's a 3A requirement. That there's no parking minimum set for the commercial space.
Well, then we could just not put a minimum for that.
Right.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
section.
Yeah, you could just-
Right,
you-
for,
But you could certainly strike the maximum.
Right. And we would just, for the other 2 uses, we could add a minimum, but not for the commercial mixed use.
Right.
Yes, you can absolutely add a minimum for the residential.
Okay.
If you had an excessive, a minimum of 4 spaces per residential unit, the state would call you out on that, but a minimum of 1 space per unit is certainly, no one will bat an eyelash at that.
Perfect.
then
Yeah.
Thank you.
You've got
That
to
sounds
have
great.
the lack of impervious being, you've got to have so much open space, so I think the maximum on the residential will work itself out.
Yeah.
So we would say the same thing for residential in a mixed-use development as well? Minimum of 1, maximum of 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bicycle storage applies to a larger development, 25 units or more. And shared parking is something we already have. It's a little different here, I think. Shared parking arrangements in the MC are just encouraged, that's all it says.
That's fine.
Big with encouraging
No
things.
argument there.
Go for
Yeah,
it.
and we have a bylaw currently that addresses for the MCEOD, that addresses shared parking. Because it's been determined, there's no reason to have commercial parking that is only for commercial use, because once,
Yeah.
you know, a certain hour of the day, those spaces would all be left empty.
Right.
All right.
All right, let's look
We
at
go to
general.
G, which is the general development standards. These apply, number one, it applies to the standards of larger multifamily developments with 10 or more units and 25,000 square feet, with the exception of, if you go to section G3C, it shall apply to all the buildings regardless of size. So,
Madam Chair,
Yes,
this is not gonna pass planning board, I can guarantee you.
okay.
Because the whole point of this was that the town would have control over the site design. And you've only got a couple of locations that are going to be 10 units or more. So every other development, every other construction under this that is less than, that is between 3 and 9 units, there is no development standard. So all of this, the requirements for open space, vehicle access, curb cuts, parking materials, planting, none of that will apply. And that makes absolutely no sense to me, because now you're giving away what control the town has to make sure that these units look like Millis. You have a specific, under buildings general, under 3C, aesthetics. Buildings shall be constructed with an exterior facade and form that's consistent with traditional New England architect. Now, I can build a 9-unit building that looks like an industrial plant. And the planning board and the town has no control. The building inspector has no control over that. The planning board has no control over that. There's nothing we can prevent that.
It does say with the exception of section G3C, which shall apply to all
Okay,
buildings
so that's for the
regardless of
aesthetics, but
size.
everything else, that G3C actually is the aesthetics that I just read. But, so you've got lighting, you've got no control. One of the things we do with lighting with everything is to make sure there's no spillage. You have to show our engineer that whatever lighting you have is not gonna spill over into a budding property. You have to show that, like mechanicals, that they're screened so that you don't stick a dumpster in the back corner that's gonna be facing in your neighbor, the abutter's living room. None of these things will apply to buildings between 3 and 9 units. And that takes our control.
Can we just say all buildings?
Absolutely. I think the general development standards, I don't know if Alexis can, if there's a reason why these only apply to developments of 10 or more units.
Not that I'm aware of.
I think
Under section 3A, any project is, can be subject to site plan review. And that is consistent with the by right requirement. So again, not that I will let John respond tomorrow, but not that I'm aware of for broader section 3A regulations.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
The next paragraph says these standards are components of site plan review process in section 13C. Do we know?
13C is the site plan review section, so a lot of these things were taken from section 13C. But the point is that this would be, if this
Limited
says
on
no
size.
more than 10,
Yeah.
for developments of no more than 10 units, then site plan review wouldn't apply. So in my mind, this should say all development standards are applicable to all multifamily, you know, or you just, here are the site plan.
Or you just drop the
Here are the
first thing. Because if it doesn't say who it applies to, it applies to everybody that's coming in.
Exactly. That whole, that
And is the
first.
site design down below as specified already in our bylaws? I mean, could you reduce this to one sentence that says, all buildings are subject to
No,
site plan review?
No, I
or
think
there's things specific?
there's things specific in
Okay.
here that should remain.
Okay.
But
wasn't sure.
that whole section 1,
So drop section 1.
drop the first, I mean, you could drop all of section 1 because you
Yeah.
don't have to say these standards are components of the site plan review process.
Yep.
Um,
And since you
I
dropped
would
it, it just
eliminate all
implies
of,
that it's
I would just eliminate
applicable.
number
Yeah.
1 and
Yeah.
just renumber it accordingly.
Site design.
So start with
Yeah,
general
Yep.
development
yeah, just have number
standards.
1 is site design, number 2, building, yeah.
So-
Yeah.
And number 1 would be site design. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Please, yes. My name's Chuck Doyle, live in Hilltop Drive in Millis. I think this is generally the right area, but there's not a specific piece of feedback. But regarding site design for the mixed use in particular, the mixed use zone has kind of a special case. I noticed that a lot of this has to do with, is all relative to a street front, which makes sense. But we actually have another situation there where there is a railroad running behind this lot that one could imagine someday being a pedestrian corridor or a rail trail. And one of the things I wonder is whether it was ever considered the possibility that that could exist and that we might want a mixed-use row along the rail side of a lot rather than just the street side. Now, that's a very large lot, very deep. So that's the other thing, is this could be, you know, if somebody bought the whole thing, they could presumably develop the street side and possibly the rail side. But the way a lot of this is written, there are things like having to have the parking behind the building. And that still, you know, might be allowed in a scenario like this, but I could picture a reasonable development where there's a mixed-use row along the rail side that is maybe someday been turned into a rail trail or a pedestrian area, a public way, essentially, that has access to businesses on the ground floor. It also feels like some of this, and I'm not sure it's precluding it, but it seems to be saying that we require retail on the ground floor at the street side, but not necessarily on the rail side. And I'm not sure that I'm suggesting to require that. But I'm kind of just wondering, was that considered? It's probably not a standard thing for all towns or all lots, but our particular mixed-use lot has this case possible in the future. And as a resident nearby there, I think that would be a great opportunity someday, you know, to have a very nice, you know, for the town, walkable area that also has access to retail. You could sit at a coffee shop. So I don't think I have a specific piece of feedback, but I guess I just wanted to make sure that maybe is thought about in the design, and that maybe that's a more of a planning board question.
Actually, Madam Chair,
Yes.
that was, and I apologize because that was something I had, I skipped over. The way it's written now, residential within buildings that do not abut a public street and are located behind other public street front buildings that contain ground floor commercial. That's something that the planning board could do as a special permit. Which would mean, let's take GAF. What this is saying is that as you've put, only the buildings that are in front, that abut 109, that abut Main Street. Theoretically, if you allow for this, I could buy GA, I could put one small building right on the street side that has to have commercial and then ask the planning board, ask for a special permit, that all the other buildings that don't abut the street don't have to have commercial. And depending upon what could happen, I mean, as far as the rail line is concerned, there's like like another 70 years on that current lease, right? Something like
Okay,
that.
maybe
It's-
that's beyond.
So it's, I mean, so
any of our
theoretically,
lifetimes, okay.
what you're talking about would need to be addressed further on down the line. But since we do want to consider that, you know, the whole idea of being able to build that and have this get around that says, yeah, it was this board's purpose to maintain some sort of commercial viability in that property. But yet, somebody could say, well, you know, you're giving us the ability to seek a special permit to waive all of that and only have commercial in the front buildings that faces the street. And if the planning board says no, and then as our building commissioner has said, now it's gonna go to zoning appeals, and then it's gonna go to court, because we don't have an appellate board in Millis. The next step is to go to court, and the court says, well, you've got nothing in here that defines what the planning board has to do to grant or deny that special permit, and now but either way, we've spent $50,000 on legal fees. So I think this gentleman has brought up a very good point. Instead of having, I think we remove the ability in those places in that subsection B area, that only commercial has to be facing 109. That you have, I don't think we should have any opportunity where the first floor of any of those buildings should not be some sort of commercial. I mean, that was one of the things.
That was what we fought
I remember
for.
that Craig had said, the only way I will agree to it being there, to potentially losing that to the MCEOD, is if this has commercial. So,
I thought I actually saw that there was a requirement somewhere in here for roadside buildings that are mixed
Yeah.
use to require the ground floor be commercial.
But she's saying if you
It
put a
is, but
building
there
right on
is-
the road that's a small
you've
retail,
got
then
under
everything behind
permitted
it. Yeah.
use, it says use via special permit in sub-district B. The planning board may grant a special permit to allow the following, and subsection B says residential within buildings that do not abut a public street and are located behind other public street front buildings to allow them to contain ground floor commercial. If we removed that, then if at some point in time, that rail trail, the railroad becomes a walking trail, all of those buildings still have to have commercial in them.
Right.
For that particular deep lot, this is easy to picture as making sense anyway.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
the Ann and Hope
Absolutely.
Yeah.
lot, where it's very deep, you know. If
Right.
somebody was at the street front, there's possibly 2 more rows of buildings that could go.
Right.
So we
Back
would just
there.
remove that
So if
section
you
B?
go to so it was permitted use section D, 3B, I would suggest removing that.
Section B.
Yes.
Okay. I think
Yes.
that makes sense, because
And
I
I
had
think
thought
that,
about the same
that,
thing.
I think it addresses what, like Craig was saying in our earlier meetings, but it also addresses what this gentleman is saying 50 years down the road.
Right.
And while we can't project everything that's 50 years down the road, there is the possibility at some point in time, they're gonna give up the right to that railroad, you know, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that far out in the future.
It's
My hopes
something
were higher.
ridiculous like that, and that, because that's one of the issues with when we tried to combining those 2 lots, there's some ridiculous amount of time left on that lease.
I did have this one other question,
So you're
sorry.
suggesting moving 3B?
3B, removing that.
I'll stop there. I had a related question of whether the GAF lot was considered and rejected as a possible mixed-use lot too, given its size and proximity to the one that is, to the Ann and Hope lot. Was it considered and rejected, or did we just?
It was.
meet-
I think the reason was because it abuts Curve Street and not a main street, and there was more
Sure.
residential back in that area, and it didn't seem to fit.
That makes sense.
If the rail trail was a thing, if that was something that existed, that made us
You
rethink
could see that
it.
making a
Yeah.
difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But at this point, it abuts residential.
All right, appreciate it, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I think we're on general development. Buildings, general? Do we need to go through that, or multiple buildings on a lot?
Go look at
3 or
Nicole.
4?
Let's go look at Nicole.
Exactly.
I was gonna ask our illustrious building commissioner if, traditional New England architecture, period, if that, I don't know that you need all that, but, for the, you know,
The definition of aesthetics.
yeah.
That can get dangerous.
I think if you just say traditional New England architecture, you think that's too broad? Okay.
No Dutch gambrel?
Well, that's just it. If you say, now it says Georgian style, federal style, Victorian, and arts and crafts are examples of acceptable styles. Well, then if I say a Cape Cod, now a Cape Cod's not included in that, but isn't,
Yeah.
don't have examples or?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I think
Yeah.
that last sentence should be removed.
Agreed.
So have it end at traditional New England architecture.
Architecture,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Yep.
Okay.
They don't like the building official's determination,
Well, that,
Yep.
that's New England style is going to give more leeway to our building commissioner.
Yeah.
Okay, so, with multiple buildings on a lot. Maybe we should just say any questions, Nicole?
I'm just looking at Nicole. I don't see anything highlighted, do I?
No, I did have I had a question.
I knew you did.
Where it says, for mixed-use development, uses may be mixed within the building or in separate buildings. Does that mean we would be, like, for example, in the GAF plant, would we, property, could you get away with doing
And in Hope
three
property.
building, the Inn and Hope, doing
Yeah.
3 buildings of all residential and just sticking all the commercial in one building?
My intent would be no, but how do we prevent that?
You remove that, you remove subsection A, because it says for mixed-use development,
Within the building.
uses may be mixed within the building or in separate buildings. I think you take that out.
What would it matter?
Because then it pushes all the retail to the first floor regardless of where it is versus if they're
Right.
just saying if you built in the back of the lot.
So what would the harm be, so that's what?
Well, no, it's not. What this is saying is if you have 4 buildings on that
Right.
lot, you could put all the retail in one
Right.
and then, have,
On the first
That might
floor
be-
of
that
one.
might
Well,
be-
but if
that
you-
might be convenient.
yes, unless what you do is you build a very small
Right.
building
One
that's
story.
only got 3 that's only
Residential,
one
right.
floor with 3, and then
Advanced
everything
studio.
else is 45 feet high, that's all residential.
Yeah, I think it needs to be in each of the buildings. Yeah, because otherwise, that's my fear too.
Is
Yeah, but a lot of
the
those
word may
businesses, a lot of those
problem
businesses.
there? Maybe it's the word may.
No, I think,
I think you take it all out.
I think businesses wanna be near businesses.
I think
People
you,
don't wanna go to one building to get one particular type of commercial use and then get in their car or walk somewhere else in the rain to go somewhere else and pick up their cleaning and go. I think you look at the whole plan, it might make sense to have everything in one building. It may be more convenient for everybody. When you're talking location of bike racks and all that other kind of stuff, it might be more convenient.
it would, but you're gonna then have to put in requirements. So if you've got 4 buildings that have, and 3 of them are, large buildings, you can't have everything, you can't have your sole commercial, or at least that's what we were saying we didn't want. If you then have one building that's only commercial, everything else has 3 floors, and the commercial building only has 1 floor, you're gonna have to then come up with building requirements for that commercial building.
That it
And
has
this
to
is
be-
a multifamily,
Right.
this is a housing, so it's just if you, in that district, everything else here is saying, first floor is going to be commercial, is gonna be business, it's gonna be commercial, and the second and third floors would be residential.
Which is how it's, but the people that do that type of work and plan those sorts of things usually have some data to back up why it makes sense to build it that way. Even from feedback from other properties they've developed and from residences of other properties. So you have to give them a little bit of an option to do what what they may know better than us, because they develop those type of properties a lot. That's my own.
What I would say in a mixed-use zone, we want the mix of, we want to make sure that we can maximize commercial and not just have, you know, a little commercial piece and just completely overwhelmed by the residential, because we want that to also have commercial uses. and
Because
not
this is
just-
only applying to those pink lots.
Right, it's only the
It's
pink
not the whole.
sections.
No, it's not the whole
And that's
area.
the whole thing that makes, I mean, the whole thing that's gonna make commercial work in Millis, because, you know, we have primary residential because we're so far from major highways, is residential.
Right.
Yep.
Residential feeds the success of the commercial.
Right, and I guess if those are three-story buildings, if that's the maximum we can go there, if a third of the square footage built was all commercial, that's kind of our goal. Yeah, two-thirds is residential, so if that's a three-story building that's got the same square footage as a third of the total built space, but I think that's cumbersome. It's not
Right,
that big
but
of a
it's,
spot.
well, it's
Yeah.
also, I think we'd have to get,
Yeah.
we'd have to ask Alexis, is that a lot, could you have something under 3A that says, okay, we're requiring, if you want to do this where it's a separate building, can we then dictate how much, whereas if you just have whatever size building you build, the first floor has to be commercial and every floor above that has to be residential.
I think the section 3 lends itself to the latter, but just to be clear, section 3 limits the amount of required ground floor use to 30% of the ground floor. So you can't require that the entirety of the ground floor be mixed use. It's limited to 30%.
Oh.
That's different
After a
than.
year and a half that we're being told
Yeah,
that.
for the last year, we've talked about that, and for the last year, we've said pretty emphatically that we need to have that first floor.
Lauren, let me triple check
Yeah.
that.
I could buy that it's 30% of the entire
Yeah,
square footage, but not
But
30% of just the ground
first
floor.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah, that doesn't make
Because
sense.
that
The
was-
walkable
Let me triple check
communities.
that.
Right.
That was,
yeah,
That's not.
that
what
was the
we-
whole reason we
Yeah.
allowed
Right.
that pink area to be.
right.
To be.
Part of this.
Because if we don't have that, the pink area can't be included, because that is our commercial area that we want to
Yeah.
work with, you know? And we thought this was a great use for that.
Okay, so
Because if
we
it
need
was
that
100%
answered.
of the
Yeah.
first floor being commercial and not 30%, then it makes sense for this to stay the way it is, I think. But if the first floor is limited to 30% commercial, then maybe
Yeah.
the changes you suggested that.
It just doesn't sound right.
That
No,
doesn't,
that's
No.
Isn't that
not.
what she just said, that you limited?
Yeah.
it?
she's
Yeah.
gonna
She's
double
gonna
check
check
on
that.
that.
Doesn't make sense.
Because we're
So,
back
but
to the
my,
rock
so
hard
my
situation.
point is, if we're going to allow commercial to be all in one building,
Yeah,
then I think we have to distinguish, we don't want all of Inn and Hope to be developed as residential, and, I'm gonna put a separate building with commercial, but that building's only big enough to put three small commercial offices in.
yeah, I just think it's
Yeah.
cleaner if it's just the first floor.
And you're
Which-
seeing those developments, all over, like Newton's got 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, where they've gone and taken city blocks. Now, they're building 8 stories high,
Yeah.
but that first floor, and there's, you know, there's pathways,
Yeah.
and it's so that, and there's all different kinds of commercial in there, that's attractive to the residents, or all but, that sort of commercial on the first floor, that's what, in all of the buildings, you're seeing, that's become very popular.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that we're not talking about, though, is that there will be building amenities, and they need to go somewhere, so they're probably gonna have to be on the first floor of a building. So it could be anything from
Well, but that goes back,
rooms and
but that goes
Yeah.
back to the use, and the ground floor use includes all of those, it includes
Right.
community spaces.
Right.
All of those amenities are included in what the
Right.
mixed-use development allows. If you go back to that D,
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is, your commercial, your commercial retail is if the mixed use is only 30%, you have 70% of your first floor, that's in theory up in the air. What is in that 70% if you can't put
Well,
residential?
let's wait till we get clarification on that, because if it is only 30%, I mean, this thing's got bigger problems than that whole purple area wouldn't be included in my mind, because that was what we were trying to protect, was our commercial.
I apologize, I misspoke, I just confirmed it's 1/3 of the building, so apologies for sending, for the
Thank you.
Thank you. That makes more sense.
That's worth interrupting for, thank you. Don't let's go down that rabbit hole.
I think the way it reads right now is fine. I think it gives you the option.
I'm just afraid that a developer, as Nicole said, puts in three 1,000 square foot stores in a corner of the lot, and then the rest of it is open then. You know, we didn't say that it has to be 1/3 of the building's surface.
So could we say that within the mixed use, for a mixed use development, 30% of the development needs to be commercial? However a developer decides to configure that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It sounds like, maybe not, but it sounds like we would remove, what most of the committee wants. So removing this A, but maybe putting one, replacing that with one, and turning one name, so it just starts out at all buildings within mixed use developments that are adjacent to public streets, may not have residential uses on the ground floor. Could we just eliminate that?
No, I think, actually, one, we just discussed, the prior thing that we discussed on D3B is the same as for A1.
Right.
We would be crossing off number one. Unless you're going to rewrite this to say it can be, you can put all of the building, you can put all of the business, commercial business, and then are you going to have are you gonna have retail on a 3rd floor?
Right,
Right.
right.
They wanna be near each other.
I think it's not that big of a lot. I mean, it's, I don't know. I don't want to make it too complicated, but I also think that
I think
a
if you-
developer, a shrewd developer is going to figure a way around it that's going to put 80% of it, 90% of it residential, and 20.
I think if you put all the retail in one building, you've got to add a lot more to this. You've got multiple things to this bylaw we've got to add to.
Right.
And I don't know if they would, if it would then pass muster.
So could you do the 30% requirement for commercial use within the mixed use district?
If you just did like a 30% requirement, would that be way too
33.
33? Is that way too open-ended?
30% of developed square footage?
Then you're gonna get
I
down
will
to
say,
the size of the retail.
excuse me, on the ground floor, the section 3A guidelines, since I just looked them up, commercial use or mixed use can only be required on the ground floor, so anything that would.
Yeah. So the ground floor of every building is what needs to have
require
it.
it on the 2nd or 3rd floor would not comply.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right, so that eliminates the conversation.
So what was
I'd
the
drop
point
all-
of saying that it could be in separate buildings?
I guess you could have one building in the front that has ground floor commercial and all the rest would be apartments.
I would say that everything in that district has to have commercial on the ground floor.
So that would
Yeah.
be a different way of writing
Right.
this, right?
Well, but
That's why I said sentence one.
Well, but
That's
we-
what we said in sentence one, isn't it? Just
no,
It's very
yes, but
close.
don't
No, that's
forget,
different.
we just had the conversation, if you go back to D3B, that said residential buildings that do not abut a public street and are located behind other public street front buildings.
And we just
We
dropped
cross that off.
Right.
So by crossing that off, you cross at least one off
Yeah,
for A1.
and the bylaw requires that it can only be on the first floor, which kind of strikes A, because otherwise you're getting far less than the square footage we want.
So I think
I think A
all
and
of A
one.
needs to be,
Yeah, A
A
and
and
the
A1 has
Yeah,
to all be crossed off.
I agree with you on that.
If you're gonna, otherwise you've got, these two things are conflicting.
Yep. And since it can only be on the first floor, and our goal is to get at least a third of that land used for commercial, that solves it.
I guess we shouldn't assume that the only people that are gonna use the commercials is from the, whatever residential dwellings are there too. So if it's busy enough down there, then, you know, it might be okay to have them in multiple buildings.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
They may wanna come from across the street and go over there, so.
You got a new light.
Do you have a question for us?
I was actually going to suggest something that's very close to, was it Bob was suggesting about the second part of that, but I think I've been brought around. It sounds like, yeah, it sounds like in section D2 is where we are saying, is it D2? That every ground floor has to be,
Right.
non-residential. And, non-residential can mean other amenities as well. And I just wanted to chime in that I think one of the big reasons, one of the drivers for having this distributed around the ground floor of all of these mixed residences is to make it walkable by those residents, which is an appeal. So rather than having it all concentrated, half a mile away on the other corner of my development. So that's it, thanks.
All right, thank you.
I would underscore that, the whole spirit of 48-3A is not just to bring more people into the town, but it's to make those neighborhoods walkable with conveniences for the people in the neighborhood. And if we could, somehow figure out how to create businesses that would, in that pink zone, that would draw extra business, that's a bonus.
Agreed. All right. Anything else on section 4?
Okay, so we'll cross out.
A.
We'll strike all of A.
Yep. All right. Section 5, mixed-use development.
Nicole? She's silent, move on.
No.
Unless anybody else has any, but she's trying to get.
No, those are pretty typical.
No.
Out of the ordinary.
All right, section 6. Do we want rooftop terrace stuff to count as outdoor space? But this would only be in the mixed use.
I think in mixed,
No,
no,
it's
this
for
is a
everything.
separate development standard. Well, this is a development standard for affordable units.
No.
Wait a minute, where are we?
This is
No, what-
right.
Where did I miss?
Under
I
general
lost it.
developments.
So 6 is still within the Annenhof.
Okay, I'm sorry, I flipped over my page too soon. Sorry. Where am I?
Did you find it?
That's what I,
Yeah, we're gonna
Wait a
need
minute,
page numbers
10.
on this too.
yeah.
Yeah.
9, 10.
developmental standards?
Yeah, but I'm just saying for the editing.
No, for just trying to get.
No,
No, I think you
I've,
gotta go back, I think you had it.
wait a minute, we just did the, okay, so we were over, no,
Building shared outdoor space.
yeah, no, you jumped ahead too. You're as messed up as I am. Yeah, we're under, yep, nope,
We're on 6.
right there,
yes.
that's 6, yep.
Got it?
Good, so I'm not, yes.
So this is for multifamily housing and mixed use. And
So we're talking about shared outdoor space.
share outdoor common space, that's great, that the public can access, but then such space may be located in any combination of ground floor, courtyard, rooftop, or terrace.
And of course, rooftop and terraces, if you include that in your 20% of open land space, you're technically reducing your open land space, because if you have if it's the multifamily housing and mixed-use development, and every unit has a terrace, you could be cutting this 20% easily by 5, and then you give rooftop, you could almost
Be
make,
right to the lot line and have
Yeah.
a open space.
Right.
Is a terrace, is a balcony considered a terrace?
depends on your definition.
But this says that
See,
the,
'cause that's, he's groaning.
the public has to access
Let me
in order
ask,
for
so
it to
what
be.
would, what's gonna happen, if I'm the builder, I'm gonna say no, and if you're the plan, you could say yes, and now it has to go to court to define that.
The rooftop stuff only benefits someone on that floor that might wanna go up and use it, so that
Exactly.
space doesn't benefit anyone else in the community except a
Right,
few.
and if you're including a terrace, then that terrace, whether it's, even if you're only talking about, well, it can't be the first floor terrace, because there's no terraces, because the first floor is commercial.
Correct.
So, I would say remove rooftop and terrace
Well,
from the,
couldn't the argument just be made that those aren't public spaces because they're only for
Private use.
The
private
builder will
use?
say the public can use
It
it.
doesn't say public space, it does say outdoors, it says shared outdoor spaces.
It says
No,
common
it says
outdoor
development
space that the
shall
public,
have
that
common
the
outdoor
public can
spaces
access.
that the
Like,
public
I
can
can't
access.
go just to an
Right, that's
apartment's
not-
rooftop.
right.
Right, you can't use my
'Cause you
balcony.
can't-
How can you
You
get in
can't
the
use my
building?
balcony.
Right.
Right, you can't get in, if you,
Right.
you can't get into the
So
second,
it's not
right.
the rooftop.
I would get rid of
potentially not
rooftop or terrace as, shared outdoor space.
Yeah.
A courtyard, fine.
So are we eliminating that?
Just rooftop and terrace, just those two words.
Sorry, Chuck Doyle again,
Yes,
just
go ahead.
real quick, I'm really getting into this.
Glad you're here.
I just want to mention that a terrace could possibly be the sitting space for a retail establishment, like a coffee shop, and maybe that is a valid, thing to consider. But rooftop seems crazy to me, too. It's
Maybe if we
last
just
one.
call that a ground floor patio.
I'm gonna say
Well,
something
yeah,
ground,
we
like
just,
that.
any
Maybe there's a way to
combination of
clarify
yeah.
that, yeah.
ground floor,
Yeah, courtyard, it could be a courtyard.
It's ground floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
ground floor.
What does it say ground floor anyway?
Well, it says, maybe we're overthinking this, because it just says all outdoor space shall count towards the project's minimum. Like, it doesn't have to be all outdoor space, right? Like, it could just be ground floor and you could just say ground floor and courtyard space, or, anything that takes on the first floor counts toward the minimum. And then that excludes rooftops and second floor balconies and all that other.
actually, extending on that, you can remove the whole second sentence. Multifamily housing and mixed-use development shall have common outdoor space that the public can access.
Period.
Period. All outdoor space shall count towards the project's minimum open space requirement.
Yep.
I think it has to say ground floor, because then the argument is that it could be the rooftop.
Right.
counts to it.
Right.
You need ground floor in that last sentence.
All right, so what do we,
Otherwise, a
Yeah.
rooftop terrace will count towards
Right.
it.
Right.
so are we
right.
striking after access?
You're taking out, which Mr. Building Inspector will appreciate all the examples.
So such space may be, oh, that's coming out.
Yeah,
So then you just change it all ground floor outdoor space.
correct.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes,
That's why I hate zoning laws.
Oh, it's brutal.
Because there's no perfect,
Yeah.
you know?
All right, corner lots.
Corner lots. One C about fire exits, I don't know if Chief has any comment on that, but the rest of it, I think, is just public access and walkability.
All right, hearing no comments, let's move on to 8, infill lots.
Infill lots, I don't really know how many infill lots we would have here. It's something to consider.
Almost there.
But, yeah, I mean, the infill lots are those small lots that were never built upon. because they weren't profitable to build upon, and they're just kind of, you know, the missing teeth in the street. So here we're saying, we're talking about, this is where we're talking about the front yard setbacks and such, to make the street look whole, really. That's the idea behind 8.
How does this work in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's my question. I'm reading it and going, what?
Yeah.
If the first lot is 40 feet setback, and the second lot is, and the third lot is, Marty, use Mark, I'm sorry. Had the mic on for Alexis. If the first lot is 40 feet back, and the third lot is, only 10 feet back, what happens to the second lot? But
Then they average the two to,
it does suggest averaging the 2.
but I don't understand how that works in practice.
Yeah.
If a new building
I
is
don't
being
either.
built.
Right.
I would think that if that infill lot, if it was being built under 3A, it would follow the 3A setbacks.
Right.
If it was built under the standard, if it's not being built under 3A and it's a small lot that really couldn't be built on, it still can't be built on.
Right.
That's why I don't understand this section.
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't know what the point of the averaging.
Well, I think we
don't
just
either.
established the setback previously.
I mean, I
They're
would think
giving you
it,
permission to match it, right, on those infill lots?
Yeah.
Is that what they're
But
doing?
this bylaw cannot override this can't override the underlying zoning requirements.
Right.
right.
So I don't know what the purpose of this is.
I find it quite confusing.
So we may want to just put a question on that and find out from John what
Yeah.
the purpose of that
purpose,
is.
And is there a better way to address infill lots being used? Because I would think you would combine the 2 lots using an infill lot and build a new building on it that would be according to the setbacks that are in this bylaw.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave
Okay.
that for another day. Principal facade and parking.
Well, parking should be in the back, not in the front setback. In the new building, you would have the building in the front, I guess, where if there's a garage or a parking area.
Yeah, this is,
ahead
this is
of where
just
that
doing
parking
away
area is.
with the whole strip mall
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
of
That's
Yeah.
what
flow.
we were after, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're putting
Yeah.
parking in the back, parking in the side, so you're
Right.
not
Yeah.
It's-
looking at what, like, it's not gonna look like that section of Medway that's just on both sides is all parking lot with buildings set behind it.
Right, so you drive by it and it looks like it's a
There.
place for cars where people also happen to live.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Can you state your name for us again?
Peter Kofopoulos,
Thank you,
Zoning Board of Appeal.
thank you.
I'm confused on the surface parking and the idea that you can't park in the front of the retail. I understand why, but it just says that you can't park in the front setback. So if the building's set beyond the minimum setback, then they would not be parking in the setback. Do you understand this, what I'm trying to say? So, I mean, why don't we just specifically say there shall be no parking in the front of the street facing?
Parking should not be located in,
In the front of the
I
building.
think
And-
they're
and-
talking about parking spaces as opposed to if there is on-street parking.
No, I'm talking about retail, commercial space and customer parking for those spaces, for those
This-
buildings.
This doesn't designate that this is only for
Mixed
the
use.
mixed use. Section 9 is a,
Okay.
it's one of the general development standards for everything. It's not specifically for for the mixed use.
I was under the impression that any street-facing buildings, or I guess they can be.
It's
They
only
could
in
be
those,
all
it's only in
residential.
that pink section that you have the
Okay, so
commercial on the first
for
floor.
residential buildings, you could have parking in front?
No, this section 9 applies to everything. So parking would be in the rear or the side of the principal building.
So saying you can't have like
You can't
two
put,
parking spaces in between the right-of-way and the house.
right, correct.
Like parking on the lawn, more or less.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only 9 feet deep or whatever.
Well, right,
I-
yeah,
I
6
think
feet.
it's a little confusing, it just,
Well, actually, he does raise a point if you've got a garage. I mean, if you don't have, if you've got, well, no, I guess so your driveway it has to be designated, so the driveway either,
Has to be in the
there's
rear
parking
or
on the side. You can't, the parking spaces can't be in front of the building.
That's what this is saying.
Yeah.
Right.
okay.
So on Ann and Hope, they would have to demolish any of those buildings in the back, right? They couldn't repurpose any building in the back, right? Because the parking, that building would have to come to the front.
Not necessarily. You
I
can
don't know
build
how
buildings
far,
in the
I don't
front.
know how far back there is.
In the Ann and Hope case, that building, well, that building wouldn't be, you're saying if that building became mixed use?
Yeah, yeah.
If someone tried to
repurpose somehow.
repurpose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd
I
have
know
to
that's
worry
not gonna
about that, because I
happen.
don't think that building structurally that you can repurpose it.
Really not.
I don't think you want anyone living in it
You would
either.
want it
Yeah.
done.
Well, they do some amazing things in those
I've seen
buildings.
the inside of that warehouse.
So,
Okay.
so are we okay with
Yeah.
saying that you can't have surface parking in the front of
Yeah.
these properties? I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't have a
Do we
problem.
want to reword that, or just, it's fine the way it is?
No, once you kind of think it through, it's not bad.
Okay,
All right, number 10, waivers.
and waivers.
So this is a fun one for
And upon
our
finding
building
consistent-
commissioner and the,
Time to retire.
yeah.
Well,
Upon the
this,
request of the applicant.
I think I think the only thing that you want to specify who the site plan review authority is the planning board, so all this is saying is an applicant can request a waiver from the planning board. And this is, I mean, again, you've got very broad, in the they can request any of these standards to be waived, the interest of design flexibility and overall project quality. There's,
You
Right,
might
I
be
mean,
able to get something for it.
it's very subjective, and if somebody really wants it waived and the planning board said no, they could sue, but I mean, it's, because it is, how do you define overall project quality? I think it would be, I mean, I think pretty much most of these things, there are provisions to get waivers on anything, whether they're granted or not. I mean, that's kind of standard.
Okay, if you don't have an issue with it, it allows a little flexibility there.
Okay?
All right, affordability.
All right, well, the purpose, I think, this committee is familiar with and gone over, and actually kind of inspired. The applicability is for developments that are 10 dwelling units or greater. And the requirement is basically households earning 80% less of AMI, and not beneath that. Making sure it's the development would be eligible for listing on the SH, on the subsidized housing inventory. I think it's paragraph 4, we need to take a look at, because that's, you know, it allows, and we can do this by majority, we went to the Attorney General, so we could do this with majority, to go up to 15% of the housing units construction in those developments can be affordable. But if our feasibility study, which isn't done, and the state says your feasibility says you can't accept it, 15%, 10% would be acceptable. So automatically it would be acceptable, but we would be going to 15% if later on the Attorney General or whoever is reviewing this, I think it's EO, LHC, HLC, says, okay, fine, the feasibility study is good, you can go to 15%. It's a little confusing, you know, what exactly are we voting on, but I think it's 15% unless the feasibility study says no, and then it's 10%.
I don't either. We've talked about it.
Yeah.
Already.
That was one I thought would have all the. That's good. If that seems acceptable, seems fine with me. I guess somebody will have to explain that perhaps at the town meeting, but I think that's fine. And no fee in lieu of developing AMI would be allowed.
I'm assuming because we don't really have that set up, that capacity set up within town.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we're not a city with, you know,
Right, and we being
legions of employees.
We
to
being
do
at
that.
4% affordability, we really could use that extra.
Yep.
That extra unit.
Yep. Agreed.
Don't say that too loud, Bob.
I didn't hear that.
And, yeah, the development standards
these-
for
these-
affordable units
right.
need to be the same as the rest of the development.
Exactly, and the administration of that shall be under the inspector of buildings,
Yep.
and
We're all excited about that, Mike.
And I guess I is the usual severability that if part of this is found not to be in compliance with state law, the rest of it still goes. These are the modifications that are going to happen to the Millis zoning bylaws. What is underlined here are the are a little different from what we have in the zoning bylaws. So this will be a section underneath Section 6, Table 2, the area regulations.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
why do they have 0-foot frontage?
I don't know.
How can you have 0-foot frontage?
That's not what was in the separate.
No,
se-
in the other section,
Yeah,
it's
right.
20 feet, but,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
so just to point out, if that all gets amended, this chart has to be amended as well.
Yes, yeah, which 6 to 10 does not make sense to me.
Nope.
Right. those are
Or the
same.
10 rear, yeah.
So I can clarify that one. I required that so the statute requires that if you have 0 frontage, it still has to be at least 20 feet. And so I had it updated to 20 feet above, and I think it was just a holdover because I corrected the bylaw, but it wasn't corrected in the change in the table.
Okay,
Okay.
All right.
that makes sense.
So a 0 goes to 20.
Yep.
Okay.
No minimum lot depth?
Yeah, I don't
yes.
think we've looked at lot depths.
No.
No,
No.
no, it doesn't, this bylaw doesn't list anything with minimum lot depth,
It's a hard word to say.
when you become dehydrated, yeah.
But it has to have
Do you have a
10,000 square
comment on that,
feet.
sir?
Thanks, that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Was that just excluded? Should we ask Alexis? Is that something that should be in there, or?
Well, if it has to
Really
have
establish
10,000
it.
square feet with, setbacks
Setbacks.
on rear, side, and front.
Yes, but if you don't have a depth, theoretically, you could have a long, narrow
6-foot deep
lot.
building.
But it would have to be, yeah.
Rail trail.
Exactly, theoretically. You
Theoret-
could, because right now, for everything else, for every other zoning district, you have a depth setback.
Okay,
I mean, you have a depth minimum, so it has to be, you have to have a certain amount of depth. But I don't know what the reason of not having a depth.
Ask the guy who's not here.
That's my new answer.
There's nothing in section 3A that dictates whether or not that needs to be there. So that would cheat, free to play around with that one.
So
okay,
we can set it.
Yeah.
yeah,
We'd like to set something there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll leave that to the planning board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you
And
wanna
the
do
building
that.
official.
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think you wanna.
I do not have the qualifications for that.
Yeah. Just trying to do math, like setback in the front, setback in the back, square footage, I realize that's where it lost me.
Well, in that zone, it would be for a single family, it would be 150, two-family, but like, I mean, this is for 5-acre minimums, but yeah, 150.
Yeah, we need some recommendation.
We do.
For the lot depth,
Yes.
so,
Yes, we do.
Are we looking at height and bulk?
so we're looking at section 6, table 3,
And
height
table
and
three
bulk.
is the height, is it the height and bulk? That-
Yep.
That will change in the zoning laws. And these are the changes in the groundwater protection part. I did have the health, the Board of Health Commissioner, the Board of Health Director got back to me on it. He has no problems with this.
I don't, okay, so this is for,
Okay, I see.
this is for residential, single-family dwellings. So is it just section 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we need to tighten that up in the proposed bylaws so that it's clearer what is being added versus what's already there.
I think we, yeah.
Yeah, it's what's underlined is what's being added.
Yeah.
There was on the page,
Right, but it gets a little confusing with the table and once you get to town meeting, then
right,
it gets confusing. So that presentation, I think, needs to be a
Any
little
requests for
clearer.
that?
I had a lot of questions about it, but if the health commissioner
Yeah.
says he's fine with it, then
Okay.
that was, my main question was, has the health department looked it over?
Yeah, so, fair question. But it looks like it's only adding that number 3.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think we need all the other stuff in there to, yeah, not, I mean, not down here, but once we get the tables done, it'll give us the setbacks, everything else.
Correct,
Right.
yeah.
Right, and the zoning map.
I'm done.
Yep.
The zoning map changes. I don't know if you saw the zoning map, we'll have to add some hatching to it ourselves.
Yep.
Because it's, I'm gonna try to make, and you each have a copy of the zoning map.
Yes.
Yeah, this lovely
And
mess.
I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now.
This is why I like GIS. Because I can't even, on paper,
We have the worst
Right.
zoning map.
I can't even find where I live here,
Sure, you live someplace.
It's here somewhere.
somewhere on here. Oh, there it is.
Right, so it's hard to tell right now. That's why I included this map with the boundaries in it, but this basically shows where the areas are, and, you know, it's the first sub-district there, and the second sub-district is over here. So when we do get around this, it's gonna have to be hatched properly and colored properly.
For town meeting, could we maybe do sub-districts A and B in colors that would stand out? I mean, everything else in this is yellow and beiges, and now you've got sub-district A is another yellow line. Could you do it like in bright purple or in bright blue, or something that will?
I'm thinking.
I would suggest this is a map that we should, I would not pull that map at a town meeting if you paid me. I would go with this one in brighter colors, because I mean, I've got this to refer to, and I'm having a tough time overlaying it in my head.
My husband wouldn't be able to figure this out at all. He wouldn't even be able to read the street names.
This is the one, I think the large-scale mock-up works for us.
I would agree, as a
simpler, cleaner.
former
Yeah.
FinCom chair, this would be the one that I
Nice.
would.
Well, there's two of us then. That's
Exactly.
two from the last 15 years. What does that make, two of the four?
Yeah, exactly. Please don't confuse town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, no, there's nothing online, because all they did here, they online, but they did
Or
it in
refer,
yellow.
whatever.
Yeah, so it's.
So other than that, on,
The pink one you can.
on the bylaw,
If you know what you're looking for.
sorry, we need the pages to be numbered the next time, you know, we look at it. When it goes to planning, it needs to have numbered pages. There's some wonky formatting in here where margins are all over the place and spacing's all over the place.
That will all
and
get redone.
That's what we always say, and
Well,
yet.
you're right, that is true, you're right, that
So this is
doesn't-
why I
yeah.
bring it up at this stage when it's still draft, because when
You
we
are
get it at
correct.
FinCom, I'm always like, what, like,
I'm
the
not going
numbers
that
don't
meeting.
even line up, you know?
I won't be going. to
Yeah,
that
so
meeting,
you
Jody.
will see that some
Absolutely.
bylaws start like section A, 1, 2, 3, lowercase a, and then some of them start with section 1, subsection A,
Yeah.
they,
And then we have to do an amendment, which is torturous, so we want to get it right the first time, as best we can. But I want to thank everyone who has worked a lot of hours on this. We're getting there, we just have some more work to do to refine this. I'm really happy with what we've been able to discuss today. We've needed this work session on the actual bylaws here, so we can continue to refine it to make sure that we're comfortable with it, that we support it, because if we can't support it, then no one else is going to. So I don't know that it's ready for planning board on the 12th, if we're still editing.
I believe that if it's not, I believe that we will have a second shot at the April meeting. I would have to let Camille know about that.
yeah, you're gonna have, that's gonna have to be decided fairly quickly, because Camille has to publish,
Yep.
for 2 weeks.
Right.
Because it's a public hearing,
Yeah.
So
If
it has
we-
to be,
If we can get the drafts back from Alexis and John of the changes and all those things quickly, we could schedule another meeting quickly if we needed to review. Maybe without them if they can't make it, but.
Could we do that in a week?
when is town meeting?
May
Okay, the
7th.
problem is, and I don't
Yeah.
know what the select boards, so once the planning board holds a public hearing, at the end, the planning board has to make a recommendation to select board,
Right.
whether to support the bylaw or not, or, you know, possibly support it with the following changes. And it is possible that the planning board could hear this presentation and the planning board chair could say, okay, we can't make a decision tonight, we have to digest all of these changes, digest everything that's presented to us. And if that's the case, then that might not have enough time to then go back to select board. They may have already, I mean, I know they can reopen the warrant, but I think that conversation has to be had with, well, with our chair of the select board and with the town administrator. I don't know, and probably with Camille to see what type, sort of, and maybe with the chair of the planning board.
And we can make a decision quickly after we get the planning board information back. It can go to press if it's close, you know, if we have to get it published. I mean, if we've got this many edits, it's not going. But if there's, oh, we need to change these two things because the planning board doesn't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. We can publish something that's close and and we can amend it on town meeting floor with a friendly amendment, you know? And then we have the November town meeting if this doesn't work. But if it's not close, it might get, you know, if we've got issues, I'm not bringing it forward to fail because of confusion.
Right.
You know, I would like to have two shots at it, May and November, but if it's just gonna be confusing and if we can't say how many, if we can't answer the simple question is, how many units can be built? What's the allowable number? If we can't answer that with conviction, then it's gonna fail. I mean, even if it's a number, if we know a number, we know that that number is right, that's whatever number it is. That might not be palatable, but it's a number, you know?
So, let me ask this. Would putting the table for how we got to the number of affordable units, or how MAPC got to it, would it make sense to try to put that in the preamble of this, or just have it separately?
If you'd want to do it separately, because if you put it in the preamble, then you're making it part of the bylaw.
Okay.
I would put it as separate, and it's something that whoever has the article, I'm assuming you, and whoever's gonna speak on it on the select board, if they need to, I'm assuming me, have in our back pocket to talk about. And I'd lead with it, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna be the big question. How much
Exactly.
is, yeah.
So,
But we need to know the number.
my question is.
And how it was arrived at.
Right.
Do we want to give a week for MAPC to turn around all these questions and get them to the planning board for the May 12th meeting? Is that realistic? Or does that need to be pushed off until the next planning board meeting?
I
Well,
think
I will tell you
Alexis,
what
I
the
think
last.
I think
said
Alexis
she would
said you
have
can
it
have
tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I will tell you what the last
Did you?
planning board
Or
meeting.
soon.
Did I hear you correctly?
I apologize. I think I said tomorrow earlier on. I don't know that I can commit to tomorrow given the number of understandably substantive
Okay.
issues that we've discussed.
Do we think we could get it by the end of the week, though? Because if we miss this planning board meeting, we really, I'm hard pressed to believe we're gonna hit May,
Correct.
you know?
Yeah.
That's
we
why
can-
I'm asking
we can
this
commit to the
question.
end of this week.
Okay, end of this week, I think works for us to get a look at something else. I mean,
We have a working document that could be discussed with the planning board
what night is
for
planning board?
Tuesday, for further refinement
Yeah.
and working on that draft. Are we amenable to that?
Yeah, I will just tell you that at the February planning board meeting, when MAPC presented just an update, the planning board chair gave them 2 week, or like less than 2 weeks, he said, we need to have this bylaw so that our members can review it. And of course, the date that they got it we got it 2 weeks later. If the planning board receives all these substantive amendments on Monday for a Tuesday meeting, I won't speak for the planning board chair, whether he says, I don't know, I don't have the agenda in front of me. If there are other things behind, he may say, I don't know if he's gonna say, I don't know how he's gonna run it. I don't know if he's gonna do what we did tonight and hold a 2-hour meeting of going over it piece by piece. If he's gonna just open it to the board and say, start asking questions, I don't know how he will run that.
Yeah, I think it needs to get to planning board by Friday.
That was what I was gonna say.
They've gotta have the weekend to look at it.
Yeah, not by, if it can't be done by Friday, then I would say then we have to punt to the next
Or
meeting.
do a quick review, because I would rather get a little feedback if they can do a quick review on any of them.
That's my feeling, that
Yeah.
I would like to work with the planning board as early as possible so that we can have a revised draft that we can, you know, continue to revise, refine, and have a working document as soon as possible.
And I think the biggest issues are the setbacks and the lot size and the, you
Yeah,
know,
see,
all
I
those
don't,
pieces.
I'm not seeing, I haven't received the agenda
Yeah.
for Tuesday night. So if we haven't received it, Camille hasn't published it, so I don't know
Actually,
if,
it is.
oh, is it
She did
published?
because she's gonna be away, I have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on the
Then
town
let me
website.
look, because what I would suspect, if there are things,
There's other hearings in front of this.
no, I'm talking about if there are other things after.
Oh,
If there are a lot of things scheduled after,
I think so.
the chair may say, look, I'm not putting, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, I wouldn't try to speak on his behalf.
All right, well, so let's say if we can get
Okay,
a revised
here's the
document
agenda.
to the planning board by Friday,
All right, no, this is the last thing on the agenda for the evening, so at least that,
if we can get it done by Friday, then we'll be ready for Tuesday, but if not, I don't expect the planning board to look at it, you know,
Monday.
with a 24-hour turnaround.
Alexis, I will send, and board, the committee, I will send, well, you have the questions. I will also send them to you tomorrow. I'll also send a recording, the Zoom recording of this, so, John and Alex, and you can go over the, you know, the details of what the committee was thinking.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll kind of see what happens. If we can't make that planning board meeting, then we need to meet once we have that revised document
Yeah.
to go over it again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
stay tuned, I guess.
Right. So if we don't get it back by Friday, well, we'll get it back Friday.
Need it
Send
back
out.
like Wednesday.
You
We
folks
need-
will have to take a look at
We
it.
need it
Get back
Wednesday,
to-
we need
Yeah.
it like Thursday. Because It's
Latest.
gotta go out, yeah.
Right, okay, so Thursday, you guys will have to read it and make sure it makes sense to you. I guess you all get back to me and the chair and I will discuss that.
Well, as the
Because
chair's-
it may not make sense for the planning board.
and as Madam Chair had said earlier, if these changes can be redlined so that
Yeah.
we're not going through everything and comparing to, because the planning board's had this now for a week and a half, so most likely,
Right.
most
Right.
of us have
Yeah.
already gone through it, so now we don't have to go through the two, or nobody in this committee
Right.
has to go old
Back and
version,
forth,
new, you
right.
know.
Yes.
Yeah, if you give them a
Red line
red
is
line
essential.
version, they'll be
Yeah.
able to see immediately what you asked to be dropped. I'm assuming at least half of them are going to agree with it being dropped, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So red line version, if we can get it by Thursday, okay it to go to the planning board as a revised working draft.
And I'll delegate if you think it looks like we've put in what needs to be put in, let's see what the planning board has to say on it.
I will do here it is. If
Yeah.
I don't hear any,
Yeah.
hue and cries, then it's gonna go to
I mean,
the
yeah.
planning
I mean,
board.
if we're arguing between 20 feet and 18 feet for front setback, send it. If it's sitting at 6, keep it.
It'll be a discussion with the planning board as well.
Right.
This isn't
Yeah.
a final draft of it by any stretch.
Yeah.
So, recognizing that it still might not be perfect, it will be a draft that's further along with our input in it. All right, does that make sense?
does.
We all
Yes.
agree on that?
It does.
Very good. All right, so I don't think we have any other business, because I don't think we've had minutes yet.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Don't
yeah,
have minutes.
I-
We'll ask you.
All right, yeah, I know.
Working from home tomorrow.
And we will, do we want to set a next meeting date, or we can
Let's
do
wait
that?
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's wait.
We'll just wait,
Yeah.
Let's see what
and we'll set the next meeting date.
The committee was very good about responding very
Yeah.
quickly to the last one.
All right, so
Each
I'll take a
in
motion
his
to
own way.
adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
It's moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Liz, thank you, Lexus.
Thank you so much.